NBC.
Hello and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza and I am your host on our journey through the movies out there that just need a little more love. And today's movie is a personal favorite of mine. In fact, if you had gone back to 2017 when I started this podcast and you said, what are the first 10 episodes you want to do? This was one of the movies that would have been on my original list. And the movie I'm talking about is Private Parts, the Howard Stern biopic from 1997, which I have been a big fan of for years. And it's just one of those movies that somehow just fell off a cliff. It just dropped off the face of the earth at some point after the late 90s. And I always wanted to talk about it, but the problem was I could never really find someone who liked this movie as much as I did. So it's been on my back burner for a long time. And I just recently found someone who really wanted to come on and talk about it. So I'm excited for this one. And my guest today, let's see, he was on the show before. I believe we did Pop Star, which is one of the funniest movies ever. If you have never heard that episode or see that movie, go instantly listen to our episode and watch Pop Star, one of the funniest movies ever made. Let's see, he's a stand-up comedian. He is based out of New Jersey. He runs the SNL Nerds podcast. I've known him for a while on the internet, and it's always fun to get him back on the show. So welcome back to Staff Picks, Darin Patterson.
Hey, Mario, how are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
Good to talk to you again, my friend.
So, Darin, welcome back to Staff Picks. Before we get into this movie, because we have a lot to talk about, kind of remind people who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Darin Patterson. I'm a native New Yorker who lives in New Jersey now. I'm a comedian. I tell the jokes. I make the yuck yucks, and I also do a podcast with my friend John Trumbull, who's also a comedian out here in New Jersey, called SNL Nerds. We both really love the show Saturday Night Live, so we do a podcast about it where we break down the latest episodes. And when there's not a new episode out, we'll talk about like an SNL related movie or TV show or something else SNL related. It's hilarious. We say offensive things. We go off on insane tangents, and it's all good in your ear. So you can follow us on Twitter, because we don't call it X, at SNL Nerds Show, and check us out there. We're also on the Non-Productive Network, so you can find us on non-productive.com. And it's a great listen, great time.
I'm very excited that you have already said that you say offensive things on your podcast, because that's going to steer in real well into this episode.
Yeah, upon rewatching this movie, I hate to be that one old guy that's like, oh, you can't do that anymore. You can't say things like that anymore. But with this movie, you really can't do a lot of things that were in this movie anymore.
Yeah, we're gonna start right off the bat here, but this movie is such a product of the late 90s. And I have to say this at the start. If you didn't grow up in the late 90s, if you weren't there in the Stern era, there's almost no way to relate to this movie. Would you agree with me?
I would say so. Luckily I was sort of indoctrinated into the Howard Stern universe, because I remember my dad really liked him, and he was he'd always, when he drove me and my sister to school, he would play it on the radio, and then he would get his last and he'd be like, hey, don't tell your mother I'm playing this. And then so based off of that, I kind of liked Howard Stern, and then I started listening to him in high school, on the way to school, and then in college too. And I don't know, of course we'll get into it, but a lot of the things he says are very off color and definitely are widely appropriate by today's standards. Shane Gillis taught us that. But I mean, at the time, but you can't admit he does have he is a very gifted interviewer, and he does have a way with words, and he does come across extremely charming to a lot of people, and likable and lovable, and that is maybe how he was able to get away with so much stuff for so long. I think newer, younger people now have no idea about the Howard Stern of the past. You probably just know him now, because now he's a lot more mellow, a lot more liberal, and he's not nearly as insane and wild as he used to be in his younger days. So I feel if you showed this to some younger people who were born maybe in the early aughts, they'd be like, oh my God, he's a monster.
Not only would they say that, their sphincter would slam shut so fast watching this movie.
Yeah, it would. Imagine the think pieces that would just be written up by this. Just so many think pieces.
And that's, to be fair, that's probably one of the reasons why this movie is not well known anymore. I mean, there's lots of reasons. We'll talk about that. Although, before we get into that, I have to know, how old are you? Because I'm curious what era of Stern you grew up listening to.
Oh, yeah, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm about to be 47 in a couple weeks. And so yeah, so like I grew up in like the 80s. So like 80s Howard Stern, I was just starting to get into it, and then like late 80s, early 90s era Stern. That's when I really kind of dove deep into it and really got a earload. And it was weird because it was also at the time where I feel like Howard Stern really lucked out because it was like kind of an era. He kind of dug his own path in a way because like the way he became famous is a way you really can't do it anymore just because radio is such a, I don't want to say dying medium, but it's definitely not what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like years ago, I remember like, Opie and Anthony was a big deal, and Bubba the Love Sponge and Man Cow and Star and Buck Wild. They used to be like big like radio DJ personalities, but that's not really a thing anymore. But Stern was able to finesse it in a way where he was still like a radio interviewer, but then he would like go off into these other ventures and still it'd be a big hit. Like when he had like the Howard Stern show on E for a while. I remember that. Like I remember like this movie. Like so he was able to sort of venture off into other avenues and like be really, really, really popular and really successful in all these things. And it's I don't know. It's kind of a product of his time.
Yeah, that's one of the things what you just said, I really want to get across to people, that this movie is very much a product of its time, and you'll see this phrase thrown around a lot, it didn't age well. And that is one of my least favorite phrases ever, because at no point when they were making this movie were they thinking this will age well. So,
yeah, no. Yeah.
I just hate that concept. Oh, someone in the future might not like this. Well, it wasn't made for people in the future. So you really have to put yourself into the perspective of the 90s, and you're just 2 years younger than me. So we're basically the same age. So we know this era, and this is what I have to get across to people, that the 90s were so much different than the 2020s when it comes to comedy. You could wake up in the morning back in the 90s, and this is me. This is literally every day of my life. I'm a young budding comedian. I wake up, I listen to Howard Stern in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of my day. During the day, if you hear music, it's probably peak Madonna in the 90s. And then later that day, I want to listen to a stand-up comedian on CD, so I listen to my Sam Kinison album.
Nice.
And then at night, I go home and I watch Norm Macdonald just roast the shit out of people on Weekend Update. I mean, this is literally the baseline of pop culture in the 90s. So it was way more edgy and hardcore than anything that's existed ever since.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it had like way more edge and way more in your face. A little bit more anger than it was back then, but it was still a huge deal. Still damned funny. And also because like I grew up in the tri-state area. I'm from Queens.
Mm-hmm.
Like Howard Stern was such a huge figure in the tri-state area, especially in like the late 80s and the 90s. Like you couldn't escape him. I remember seeing like Howard Stern bumper stickers everywhere and Howard Stern posters everywhere. He was just such like a huge figure. I mean, like the whole world knew, not the whole world, but the whole U.S. knew who he was, but definitely the tri-state area like claimed him. They're like he was like their king to a lot of people.
Yeah, you guys were, dead central, ground zero. No, bad term to use, but you guys were at ground zero for Howard Stern. I grew up in Seattle, and I went to college in Northern California, and I was well aware who Howard Stern was. I listened to him every day. So, yeah, even though it was a New York, New Jersey thing, he was all over the U.S. And I really have to talk about this. This is something I want to get your thoughts on. That I think it's kind of been misinterpreted what Howard Stern was at the time. And that most people nowadays would say he was a shock jock. He just existed to, shock people on the radio and do disgusting things and offend everyone. But there's a lot more to Howard Stern that I really think has to be brought out here. And again, this has nothing to do with Howard Stern now. We're talking at the 90s. The reason, I'd argue this might be debatable. I think the reason he was so popular was not so much that he was offensive or he was the one that would do anything on the radio. I think he was one of these populist heroes, like... Mm-hmm. The everyday Joe, the regular guy sticking it to the man, shoving it in NBC's face. I can do whatever I want. You can't fire me, and the fans love me. And yet I think that was his main appeal, and I think that's kind of been lost to time, what a populist folk hero he was.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of, especially like a lot of guys, they really like to look forward. They really like to look up to those people that like can kind of do what they want. And I don't, whatever, and you can't do anything to me. Like the Don Drapers or the Tony Sopranos of the world, like that character that just like kind of does what they want. They don't care. I mean, I just also around that time. Sam Kinison was a huge deal. Like Andrew Dice Clay, you could say, sort of followed that same mold where there were just these guys unapologetically saying these things, these brash things, and just kind of getting away with it and not caring who they angered. And for a lot of guys, they really look up to it, like, wow, I wish I could be him. He's my hero, type of thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't like this. This is going to edge into politics a little bit, and I don't want it to be, but it kind of has to. But this is something that's kind of lost in the world today. This mentality of the everyday man against the government or against the companies in charge.
Right.
Where that was very much like a Gen X thing in the 90s, like us against them, the people against the rich fucking assholes. So like that was a huge thing of Howard Stern's appeal, and unfortunately, like in 2024, that doesn't really exist anymore because people are kind of against each other. It's like the left against the right. It's like humans against each other. So I really miss that aspect of the 90s where it felt like everyone on the bottom was the same and we just loved to hate all these rich assholes. And to me, that's Howard Stern's appeal in a nutshell back in the 90s, that he was the guy speaking for us against all the rich people.
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way. But yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Like back then, it was very much the downtrodden versus the rich elite.
Mm-hmm.
But like now, like you said, it's more like we're more like the Hatfields and McCoys than ever, where it's just like the anti-woke, quote unquote, against the liberals or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
like even to the point where now you have the right leaning people kind of hugging up and looking up to the Elon Musks and the Trump and the millionaires of the world who literally don't care anything about you, but you see them as a hero because they say the same horrible thoughts you have in your head. But it's just
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Like, I miss the 90s. As a child of the 90s, it horrifies me when I see anybody like buddying up with millionaires and all these rich celebrities. Like, are you kidding? That is so against anything I would have thought in the 90s. And I've never really left that mindset. So I just wanted to point that out here.
Yeah, no, great point. Great point.
Yeah, to the extent, okay, to back up my claim here. I saw how this movie, Private Parts, again, this is for people who don't know, Howard Stern, huge populist radio shock jock. Many people loved him, many people hated him, but you always had a strong opinion of him. I saw this movie. This was his life story. He came out with his life story in 1997. It was a free preview in San Jose. I got to see it a couple weeks before it opened nationwide.
Oh, nice.
To this day, that is the loudest, craziest audience I have ever seen in a movie theater. I mean, it was nuts. And I saw, Star Wars on opening weekends and stuff. I've seen James Cameron movies. Nothing. There's nothing that's even close to an entire theater of people screaming Baba Booey every 10 minutes. Or like when Fred Norris shows up on stage, they all scream Fred or Jackie or fuck NBC. Just the crowd going insane. And that is my biggest takeaway from this movie. What a big event this movie was at the time.
Yeah, I remember because like when I was still listening to Howard when he was promoting this movie and like talking about shooting this movie, he had like the actress that played his wife on and interviewed her, and like it was a big deal. People were getting amped up to see it, really pumped up to see it. Like, tickets were selling out left and right. I mean, I don't remember if I saw it in the theater or not. I mean, I was in college when the movie came out. I don't remember. I might have seen it on DVD, but I do remember this movie being a huge deal. And like, I can only imagine like seeing it in the theater would almost be akin to like one of those Rocky Horror Picture Show screenings where just people just go nuts and like throw whatever in the air when a certain person comes up on the screen.
Yeah, I was legitimately frightened. That's the only time I've ever been frightened in a movie theater. I may not get out of here alive because there's going to be a riot.
Oh, boy.
Okay, and here's my other time capsule I like pointing out to people is that in college, 96, I graduated in 96, and the summer after college, I took a job in a warehouse where we were stacking educational supplies or whatever. And again, this absolutely will set the mood if you didn't grow up in that era, that there was 4 college students working this job every day, and then this middle-aged woman. I forget her name, but there was 5 of us. And every morning we'd turn on Howard Stern because we're like, if we're going to be stacking this menial task of stacking boxes all day, we need something interesting to listen to. Without question, 2 minutes after we turned it on, this middle-aged woman walk over, turn off her radio and say, absolutely not, I'm not listening to Howard Stern. And so This is the divide right there.
Wow. Yeah, that was a thing. Like, and they even mentioned it in the movie, talk about how people really love him, and people who hate him really hate him, but they keep listening because they want to see what he'll say next. It's a weird thing. Like, a lot of people like just could not stand to listen to him at all. But there are people who hate him, but like can't turn the radios off because they just want to hear what he wants to say next, so they could be further angry at him. I guess people love to be angry. I think the internet's taught us that.
Well, you're lucky because you said your dad let you listen to it with him in the car. There is no way I'm listening to this or watching the show with my parents around. Like, I can't even fathom in the late 80s, because he had a TV show. People may not know this. Before he went syndicated, he did have this TV show, and I would always be sneaking downstairs trying to watch it when I'm a teenager because I might see boobs or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the ultimate. You watch this when your parents aren't around. Howard Stern.
Yeah, no, my dad loved it. He would play it on the radio. I think he thought we were maybe too young to totally understand what everything was happening. So he was like, they don't get it. It'll be fine. So, but yeah, like I liked it and I laughed at certain points just because like he put on funny voices. I think I remember my dad. I don't know if you remember Butt Bongo Fiesta, but I'm pretty sure my dad had the VHS tape somewhere, and I might have watched it without his. But anyway, let's talk about the radio show. Yeah, it was a crazy show. It's like, again, something that couldn't really be replicated again today, I don't think. But it was, for its time, it was really something.
I'm just trying to picture a scenario where your dad is driving you, young Darin, down the street, and you're listening to Howard Stern, and the scene comes up where the woman has an orgasm over the air from the subwoofer. I'm just trying to imagine how that would go in the car.
I think he would have turned that off. I don't remember hearing that episode. I think he would have been like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, maybe your mom's right. I just turned it off. Let's put on Whitney Houston or something you kids will like.
Get the Wiggles. We need the Wiggles.
Yes. Or whatever was around in the late 80s. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, so we got to place this movie into its historical context a little bit. So Howard Stern, biggest shock jock, radio star on the East Coast, eventually went nationwide, eventually had a TV show, eventually had a book. This movie's based on a book. That's not, I should have mentioned that. Do you have the book, or did you ever have the book?
My dad might have. I didn't get it. I think he had like 2. Yeah, there was the one book, Miss America, and Private Parts, right?
Yeah, first one was Private Parts. The sequel was Miss America.
Yes, yeah. I'm pretty sure my dad had Miss America. He probably had Private Parts, but I don't quite remember it.
Yeah, okay, so the book came out in 94 or something, and then the book was such a hit, they're like, wow, Howard Stern could actually go nationwide. They made this movie. And this was a big deal. And there's a couple things I got to point out about this movie. Number one, to this day, everyone says, oh yeah, Paul Giamatti was in that. He was so good, and like he saves the movie, which I'm going to dispute that a little because I think it's even good without him.
Yeah, and also like he doesn't appear in the movie till like halfway through the movie.
Oh, it's well past halfway.
Yeah, he's like in the last like 45 minutes or so.
Yeah. Yeah, so everyone remembers this movie. This is Paul Giamatti's debut. He shows up as a program manager named Pig Vomit. We'll talk about him. But yeah, he's only the last 30 minutes of an hour 40 long movie.
Yeah, I mean, and also he's great in it. He's solid as all hell. Like you see him, you're like, oh, that guy's got the goods. But like, yeah, he does. I don't think he's like, I wouldn't say he's the saving. He might be like the standout or the thing, but I wouldn't say he's this. I don't. Yeah, but I agree with you. Like I wouldn't say the movie falls apart without him.
Yeah, it's a really good movie for an hour 10 minutes before he even shows up. That's my argument.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree.
Okay, so the pedigree of this movie is really fascinating because on paper this movie shouldn't work. It's about a guy who's too offensive, and he had a lot of enemies, and this isn't the movie you'd watch with your mom or maybe even your girlfriend, perhaps. But the pedigree, again, our producer of this movie is Ivan Reitman, who is pretty much the producer of every big-name comedy ever of that era. The director of this movie is Betty Thomas, who I love her movies. She also did the Brady Bunch movie, which is one of my favorite comedies ever, and this was her follow-up.
Crazy.
And then the writer of this movie, I think his last name is Blum or Bloom, Len, Blum, Len Blum. He wrote this movie and also Meatballs and Stripes.
I mean, 1-2 punch right there.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, because I think that's the thing. Like Howard Stern was really cognizant of, like when he got the chance to make the movie, he wanted to make it good. Like I think he kind of knew that, yeah, I could put out some, some half-ass slapdash movie, and my fans will see it and they'll like it, but I know the critics will like eat me alive. So I want to put together a movie that both my my fan base will like and the critics will have to admit is good or decent.
Yeah. And that is essentially what happened. That, yeah, this movie is way better than it has any right to be, but a lot of it's because of those three. Although I remember reading somewhere that Howard Stern, they kept giving him scripts. They're like, we want to, make a movie out of your book. And he kept rejecting scripts. I think I read somewhere he rejected like 22 scripts before he got this one.
Damn.
So, like you said, he was really picky and very strict that it had to be good. It couldn't just have to be, it couldn't just be a quickie. It really had to be a good movie.
Yeah, no, and I respect that. Like that's because yeah, like anybody could just like throw together a movie and just put it out and be like, oh, whatever. Like the critics will hate it, but it'll make money because I have a huge fan base, and people kind of do that today. But like I like that Howard Stern wanted it to have a movie with Fartman in it. He wanted it to have some artistic integrity, and in a way, I know it sounds weird when I say it, when I think about it. But yeah, like he wanted it to have, I wanted to have some artistic integrity. I want it to be like an actual solid, good movie and not just some cash grab. So I respect him for that.
Yeah, it was a really savvy move, and I had a lot of respect for him. But we have to talk about the elephant in the room here. So to summarize this movie, we'll get into it much more as we go into it, but the movie's all about how Howard Stern's just a regular guy, and he's married to his wife, Allison, and he loves her. And even though he's a monster on the air, he's just a normal, cuddly family guy back at home.
Right.
And that's a great movie. That is why this movie works. It's a fantastic story, the dichotomy there. Then in real life, right after this movie comes out, he gets divorced.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. I mean, that to me, that's what ruins this movie, unfortunately. Like, the movie still stands on its own as a work of art, but it's not realistic anymore. It does nothing to do with Howard's life, and that's what I think happened to this movie afterwards. That even though it's so good, it doesn't ring true anymore when you know his life changed after the movie.
Yeah, what did they get divorced like immediately after the movie came out? That was like maybe a year or two after.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't immediately. There was enough for the movie, the goodwill of the movie to pay off for a couple years, but it was pretty quick.
Yeah, it is a bummer when you think, especially like at the very end of the movie where he kind of goes on about, oh, Allison's the love of my life, she's my rock, and so happy with her and our kids. Like he basically dedicates the movie to Allison at the very end,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So like to go from that to like later on, it's like, oh, they got divorced. It does, it does kind of leave a little bitter taste in your mouth knowing the outcome, but I don't know. I think there's this in the moment he was like it was a beautiful story. So maybe just kind of take it for that what it is and not I guess what it turns out to be. I guess in a way.
Yeah, so this morning I was browsing. There's a Howard Stern subreddit. I was looking at it just to see what people said about Private Parts, because I was curious what Howard Stern fans in 2024 think of this movie from 1997. I was kind of surprised that a lot of them hate this movie. They don't like it at all. And that really shocked me.
Wow. What, Howard Stern fans?
Yeah, modern Howard Stern fans, because I was reading this a lot. And this will get into an argument I have whether you can separate the artist from the art from the artist.
Right.
A lot of people are like, oh, that movie, after it came out, I just realized the whole love story was a lie. He and Allison weren't close.
Oh.
He was faking his love for Allison because he cheated on her. So, like, people cannot separate the art from the artist, and that seems to be a big problem. Now, I have no problem separating this. In fact, with me, it's almost the opposite. I'm always shocked when people combine the art and the artist, because I don't even do that. I don't do that. But I noticed a lot of people have a hard time with this movie, that they can't accept it anymore because this isn't the reality.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the issue Howard had throughout his life. Like in the movie, he said he's like very misunderstood. I think like the radio persona he created was, I guess, so close to who he was in actual real life. Like it was hard to separate the two in a lot of people's minds. Like when he's being who he is, like you can even kind of see it. Like when you see like the younger Howard to who he is now, you can see how he changes, how the way he kind of dresses, and he grows his hair out even longer and longer. Like he's getting more and more into his personality, his on-air persona. But like off the air, he's not quite that guy. It's the same issue like Andrew Dice Clay had.
Mm-hmm.
People couldn't separate the Dice Man from Andrew Clay. So yeah, so I guess in that regard, I guess people felt like his whole love for Allison was a lie because he was like, oh, they got divorced, so that means the whole marriage was a sham. It was a long con. It was the whole, like from the day he met her to when he got divorced, the whole thing was a setup. And it's like, dude, no, that people get divorced all the time. That doesn't mean when they were together they weren't in love. It's like there was love there at one point, and now at the end there isn't, and that's just how that's how some marriages end, and it's a bummer and it's sad. But that doesn't mean the whole thing was a lie. That doesn't mean that the movie was a lie. It was real in the moment.
Well, I guess this goes to my question. Does that aspect of Howard's life ruin this movie for you at all? I mean, I know it doesn't. You wouldn't be here if you hate this movie, but is it a damper at all when you watch this movie and you know the story?
It's a bit of a bummer because yeah, where you do know where it ends. Like it would, I will admit, yeah, it does put a bit of a damper on it, but I don't think I should throw out the entire movie because of what happens at the end of the divorce at the end. Like there's still a lot of good in this movie. There was love in this movie. He did have love for his wife. He does love his kids. So like I can't see just discarding this entire movie off of the divorce at the end. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's where I fall. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm like, Ivan Reitman and Betty Thomas put together this amazing comedy. So, like, even though maybe it wasn't true at the end of the day, it's still a great piece of art. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, and one more question, just one more before we get into the plot of the movie. Do you still listen to Howard Stern now?
To be honest, I have not listened to Howard in a while, just because I know because he's not on regular radio, he's on XM radio, so I have to like get a subscription, which I don't have. And like I know, maybe once in a while I'll watch like a YouTube clip he'll put up or something like that. But yeah, I don't listen as regularly as I used to. I think I kind of tuned out around the time, maybe I know like last I listened to like High Pitch Eric was around, and there was I forget Richard, the redheaded guy, and like Sal was just coming into it was coming onto the show. But then, Crazy Cabby and whatnot. But like after that, I kind of zoned out. Like after I graduated from college around 2000, I started to peter off.
Yeah, see, my answer is real similar to that I listened to him religiously in the 90s. This was, if you're a comedian, a young wannabe comedian, this is must-listen radio. So I heard Howard Stern every day. I know all the little bits. I can still picture Robin's theme song in my head when she ever started talking. They play her little nature music. Yeah. But I know that era so well. But then after the movie came out, after he divorced Allison, he went through a phase where he was single and he was dating lots of models in Los Angeles. I remember this. And I'm like, his story is way less interesting when he's just a rich guy banging models. Like, that is so much less interesting when that's the guy I'm listening to. And I kind of lost interest around then.
Yeah, I think that's when the big change started to happen. Because like you said, at first he was like the everyman, like the little guy, just kind of sticking it to the man and thumbing his nose at the authority. But then after he got divorced and started dating all these, supermodels, and he got married to Beth, his now wife, who's I guess a former supermodel or something like that.
Yeah.
And then after you learned about all the money he was making from his deal from Sirius XM, and you learned he was like a millionaire, and then that whole everyman persona that he had just kind of went away, and it's like, oh no, now he's part of the 1% now. He's not an every guy.
Yeah, he can't pass himself off as one of us anymore. That's the problem.
Yeah, no, he has millions and millions of dollars at his disposal.
But yeah, that's the one thing I wanted to say, that I honestly have not heard Howard Stern since about 2001. And I hung in there for so long. I really loved him. But yeah, his life changed and he ended up on XM, so you couldn't find him on free radio anymore. And I know Stern would say, I evolved, I'm a much better human being now. He kind of disavows this whole back part of his life. And I think that's a shame because I love this back part of his life. But I could see why he'd want to move forward. But I just personally don't find him as interesting anymore. It's just there's nothing for me to relate to anymore when I listen to him.
Yeah, I mean, he's still like a very good interviewer, but yeah, but like all the kind of funny, hilarious bits he had were he doesn't really do anymore. Artie Lang is gone. Like Artie Lang was a huge reason why like I kept listening in college. I thought he was hilarious. He still is hilarious. But yeah, like I would say around 2000, 2001, like you, I kind of like once he went to XM satellite radio, I was like, well, like this is I think we're done here.
Yeah, we do have to explain that to people because younger listeners may not know. XM was a weird thing back in the day. Like it was the very first pay radio network. And I remember at the time, I mean, I'm still kind of like this today. Why the hell would I pay for radio? It's free in my car. Why am I paying for this? So like I held out for the longest time. So to me that was when he kind of lost his mainstream appeal, when you have to pay to listen to him. Well, it's not quite the same thing now.
Yeah, because like I mean, I think his response was like, well, people pay for cable, you pay to watch TV, why not pay for radio? And like, and yeah, that does make sense. But then also with XM, I mean, this was before it was built into every car, so you had to like buy like a separate device and hook it up to your car, like a car stereo type of thing, and like slap an antenna on your roof. And it was like it just seemed like a whole to do, and then you'd have to pay like the monthly fee and whatnot. And it just, I don't know, to me, it just seemed like a lot. Like it wasn't like today where you could probably just download an app and listen to it. Like you had to get all this other hardware in order to like you have to like fashion yourself a radio and just to listen to this Howard Stern tell some fart jokes.
Yeah, there's a big difference between radio being delivered to you or you going and finding radio. That's a big difference.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about this movie again. Big hit in 1997. It was the talk of the town when it came out. This was the talk of Hollywood. Howard Stern, of all people, had the number one movie in America. But although there's some surprisingly good actors in here backing him up, and we open the movie with one of them that I always forget that Allison Janney is in this movie.
Totally forgot she was in this till like the first scene where I'm like, oh shit, Elton Janney. All right.
Yeah. So the movie opens. It's like in retrospect of all these radio program managers that hated Howard Stern. And it opens with Allison Janney, where she's telling her memories of Howard Stern working with him. She plays some program manager from DC. She's like, he was offensive, he was obnoxious, he was disgusting. And she's like, do you want me to keep going? And she's like, one time he held this contest where he gave a new toilet to the listener with the largest bowel movement. And she's like, and you can imagine the logistics of that.
I mean, it's a pretty good idea. I mean, if you know.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff Stern was doing. It was just bizarre, but you remembered it. You noticed it and you remembered it.
Yeah, like who would think to do something like that? Like, but it's not a bad idea. If you could partner up with the Home Depot people, hey, you can win-win.
Okay, so now we go to the movie. It opens at the MTV Movie Awards in 1991 or two, I forget where. Okay, I gotta explain this to people that won't know. I'll do this short, but Howard wanted to break into mainstream media. He eventually got through with this movie, but this movie was not his first try. What he eventually did is he had a superhero he created named Fart Man, and he was trying to make it into a major motion picture. So the movie opens with him showing up as Fart Man at the MTV Movie Awards, probably in 1992 or so. So I just have to explain that. That was his first try as a movie star.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing this back when I used to love watching the MTV Movie Awards, and I think it was like Luke Perry was the presenter, and then he, in this movie it's John Stamos. But yeah, then he's like, oh, look up to the sky, it's Fart Man. And then Howard Stern just, came down in this insane outfit.
How would you describe this outfit to someone who has not seen it before?
Oh, gosh, let's try. It's, he has like these kind of big, kind of like cool Modi sunglasses on his face, or a Zoot from the Muppets. he had this yellow top on that says Fart Man across it, showing his midriff, and bright yellow and red pants that are with the butt part cut out of the pants, so you see bare cheeks.
Yes. If you didn't think Howard Stern was unattractive enough, you're going to see his bare ass right at the start of the movie.
Yep.
Yeah, so this was a real thing. Howard Stern tried to make Fart Man into a movie. It never happened, but the movie opens with him pretending to be a Fart Man at the MTV Awards, and he's like, why am I doing this? This is so stupid. And he's basically going to narrate this whole movie, his whole life story. He's like, everything I do, it sounds funny at the time, but I get in trouble, and then I make a jerk of myself in front of the public. And then he said, but people misunderstand me, and that's the whole thesis of this movie, that he's misunderstood.
Yes, misunderstood genius.
So yeah, so he does a little Fart Man stunt at the MTV Awards, and then he goes down, and we have a wonderful bunch of cameos here that I love. What a snapshot this is of like 1992. Did you catch all the cameos?
Yeah. See, who did I catch? I caught Ted Nugent, caught Flavor Flav, caught Slash, caught my man John Popper from Blues Traveler, MC Hammer.
MC Hammer.
Yeah. Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, of course. Who, like, I remember him being on the show a lot. Like, he appeared on, like, I think him and Howard were buddies. So Tiny Tim, the great Tiny Tim. Of course, when you think rock and roll, you think Tiny Tim. And at the very end is Ozzy Osbourne, who was also on Howard's show. Like, all these celebrity cameos, I think, were, like, pretty regulars on Howard's radio show.
I believe I saw Right Said Fred in there, too, which is a really random one.
Yes. Oh, okay. That was them.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't know.
Yeah. So Howard walks back through the celebrities after the MTV Awards, and all the celebrities are like sneering at him, like, "Who do you think you are to join our ranks?" And it's really funny watching Flava Flav looking down on Howard Stern.
Yeah, Flavor Flav looking down on you. You made some big mistakes in your life.
So anyway, so Howard's like, "This is the whole point of my life. I'm misunderstood. People misunderstand me." And so we're going to start the movie. He's in an airport now, and he's about to take a flight, and he sees this big, tall supermodel played by Carol Alt, and he's like, "Look at this woman. She's going to sit next to me on the plane, and she's going to hate me just because of who I am. She's never even met me." And so, yeah, that's exactly what happens, right? She gets on the plane. She's like, "Yeah, do I have to sit next to that idiot?"
Yeah. I think he's even reading a newspaper with his picture on the cover about the whole debacle from the night before.
Yeah, from Fart Man, yeah. So this is his story, that beautiful women instantly hate him in public because what they think of his persona on the radio. And he's like, but it's all an act. It's just a myth. Like, I want them to know me, the person, who I am, who I was. And we instantly go back to his childhood. Again, it's kind of like Man on the Moon. We get a little biopic of his childhood, what led him to be the man that he is. And this makes me laugh just because I remember the Howard Stern show, that he had the sound clip. He would always say, my dad, when I was a kid, would always say, what's the exact phrase? "Shut up, sit still." And he'd play this clip on his radio show. So that's the very first thing we hear his father saying in the movie is, "Shut up, sit still."
Yeah, and the guy that played his dad said it exactly like the sound clip. Sounds like, wow, you really nailed it.
Yeah, that's just a little inside Stern joke. You would have known that clip if you listened to him. He loved to make fun of his dad back in the day.
Yeah.
So we'll just whiz through his childhood. So his dad was a radio engineer for NBC. He would drive Howard to watch him work every once in a while. And Howard's like, I want to do what my dad does. I want to work in radio. But it's kind of a problem because Howard was, let's just say, a bit of a loser, and he did not have a good voice.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Like, through the years, you learn that, like, Howard is, like, super insecure and, nebbishy and like, he's like a tall, gangly guy. And he just doesn't know what he's doing in life.
He was not attractive. That's something my wife and I would agree on when we're watching this movie. My wife would say he was not an attractive man or teenager.
Yep.
And the hair didn't help. He had like Big Bird hair.
Yeah, very much so. Like, I think, later on somebody does say he looks like Big Bird because he has big, poofy, like, black curly hair. To this day, like, he hasn't lost his hair. It's insane.
So yeah, Howard Stern's childhood was odd. His parents were odd. He was a loser. He was like 7 feet tall when he's 12. He's stick thin. He's got a bad mustache. He does drugs. He smokes dope. And then this is the other thing. I always forget about this. I remember this from his book that he lived in the way he described it, he lived in an integrated school where all of a sudden one day, this is how it's not in the movie, but he describes it in the book, that they started busing in to mix the races in the school. And what happened was every one of his white neighbors left. They're like, we don't want to do this. So basically his school became 6,000 black kids and him. That's how he described his childhood. So he's like, let's just say I didn't fit in real well.
Yeah, white flight. I think because I know he grew up in Roosevelt, Long Island, which I believe, like Eddie Murphy grew up there, and I want to say Public Enemy, the guys from Public Enemy. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Chuck Jean Flavor from there. But yeah, like I know, like Roosevelt, Long Island, it was like predominantly black, especially back in the day, from what I heard.
I just like to picture Howard Stern and Public Enemy going to school together.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, Stern.
Yeah, so Howard Stern did not grow up the easiest of childhoods, especially with the way he looked. But yeah, it's just the poor child actors they picked to play Stern, these poor kids.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the high school Stern, the guy that had playing the high school Stern. He looked a lot like a young Stern. Like he's like I bought him as like a young teenage Stern, like him smoking dope, but like it always made him paranoid and like always like quickly looking over his shoulder and being quiet and not knowing what to say around his parents. Like I bought that.
I bought it. The teen years are very funny. That's actually a very short part of the movie, so I'm gonna jump through this. But yeah, so we see young teenage Stern. We see him doing a puppet show. At one point, he wants to go into entertainment, so they give him they buy him puppets, and they take him to like a senior citizen home, and they're like, here, entertain the old people. And Howard, of course, is a bit of a troublemaker with a little edgy sense of humor in him, even as a child, where he's like, no one's paying attention to these puppets, so he has the puppets start having sex with each other and doing each other like Team America, which is a funny scene early in the movie.
Yeah, like early on, you kind of see that he has, even though he's like quiet and awkward, he does have like this kind of, not acerbic, but like this kind of little bit of a demented type of sense of humor. Like, I think he's at one point they show him like reading Mad Magazine, which of course is for a number of people with they're a source for demented humor. And so like with the puppet show and like the Mad Magazine, you see like the seeds of kind of who he grew up to be and like how he got the sense of humor he got.
Yeah, as my mom would say, he had a little bit of a gleam in his eye. That's how she would have phrased that. Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Okay, yeah, so Howard wants to go into radio. That's the only thing. He has no ambition. He has no skills. He wants to be going to radio like his dad. And his dad even tells him, why do you think you are going into radio? You do not have a good voice. You have no verbal ability. So his dad is not supportive.
Yeah, his dad has a weird speaking voice, too, the way you have no verbal ability. Like, he talks to somebody who just learned the language. I don't know. I've always found that interesting about the way he like enunciates and his diction is like.
It almost sounds like that mid-Atlantic accent I think all the movie stars had back in the 40s and 50s.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I can't do an impression of it, but Conan O'Brien does a good impression of that mid-Atlantic accent. That all the radio people would have had that.
Like, get out of here, see? Scram, Amscrade.
Exactly, yeah, perfect, yeah.
Take a powder, toots.
Yes. Okay, so Howard somehow gets into Boston University. His father pulls some strings and gets him into a communications program. And this is real, I remember from his book. That Howard actually was a really good student. They kind of leave that out of the movie, but he was actually almost straight A's in college. He was actually a very accomplished scholar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he gets into Boston U, and this is where Howard Stern starts playing himself in the movie because they could not find a gangly enough 20-year-old to play Howard. So we have 40-year-old Howard playing himself at 20, which he even admits in the movie. I know I look a little old, but in this movie you got to suspend disbelief.
Yeah, but like I think he pulled it off, I'd say.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this. Is he actually a decent actor?
Good question. I would say he was decent enough. No Sir Laurence Olivier or nothing, but for the most part, I think he did all right. I mean, especially for his first time.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I was watching this movie, I don't see any scenes where he's, like, embarrassingly bad, which is hard to do when you're playing yourself for the first time, I think. So, and I know they said he worked really hard. He really went through auditions and acting lessons and stuff. He really was really dead set that he had to come off well in this movie. So I actually think he does a pretty good job for a guy who's a non-actor.
Yeah, like I think all the, we'll talk about like Robin Quivers and Fred. Like I think they all did a pretty solid job.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Robin because I think Robin is fantastic.
Yeah, no, she's good. I'm surprised she never like did any other like things or any other movies after this. I guess she said didn't want to.
Yeah, I guess once all that XM money came flowing down, she didn't need it.
That's right.
Okay, so Howard, his senior year, big, gangly, awkward Big Bird, gets his first job on the Boston University radio station, college radio, which anybody who's listened to college radio knows no one ever listens to it.
Nope.
But I'll try to do an impression here, but I love his first radio voice. And I will say, I remember from his radio show at the time, he would say, yeah, I went back and listened to all my old tapes to see how I used to talk, and he was so embarrassed at how he used to talk, and he's like, I incorporated that into the movie. And here's my impression. Hello, this is Howard Stern, and you're listening to Boston Radio. It's so high and lilting, it's not like his style at all.
Yeah, I think at the time, like, I mean, he probably even talked about, like, he was, I guess, so nervous of being on the radio, and just, like, so uptight, and just so conscious of the fact that he was on the radio that he maybe got into his own head, so his voice just got higher just because he wasn't relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Which, of course, later on we'll talk about that the one scene where he does find his voice and he does kind of relax and he does become the Stern we know now.
Let's take a little aside here, just because you and I both have podcasts and people might find this interesting. Is your regular speaking voice different than your podcast voice?
No, not really. Like I just let it fly, baby. What you see is what you get. Like I think the fact that I'm doing it on that we podcast on a laptop and there's no one else in the room when I do it, like that kind of loosens me up. And so this is the voice, man. This is all me, raw, uncut.
Yeah, I love asking people that question because it's different for every person. And I don't know if I've ever talked about this on Staff Picks. I might have, but like my real voice is much lower. It's lower like this and it's deeper. And when I'm talking, this is my actual voice. But the problem is I'm very quiet. My voice, I have no air behind it. I have small lungs.
Okay.
So to get it up to podcast volume, I got to do this. And when you do this, your voice gets higher.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't actually have this high a voice. My normal voice is down here. So yeah, that's just, if people might find that interesting.
Interesting. Well, no, wow, you opened my eyes to something. I didn't even think about that. Hell, do I need a podcast voice now? Damn.
I don't know. I think your voice yours projects pretty well on its own. Mine doesn't do that naturally.
Yeah, I tend to be naturally loud, so it does. Yeah, much to the chagrin of my wife, but yeah, like it does. Like, I guess I got a voice made for podcasting, baby.
Well, you're also a stand-up comedian, to be fair, where your voice has to project over an audience and you're playing to the people in the back of the room. So even without trying, you are naturally speaking loud and out towards people.
Yeah, I was doing this right without even knowing it. How about that?
There you go. And it always makes me wonder how Mitch Hedberg made it as a stand-up comic.
Yeah, like I remember hearing about early Mitch, about how he was just like mumble into his microphone and like people couldn't even hear him. They need to like speak up. But he made it.
He made it. Yeah. I don't want to talk about that. Yeah. Well, I could have talked for Mitch for 10 minutes, but I won't. Okay. So Howard gets his first job and he has this really embarrassing moment early in his radio career. One of my favorite scenes in this movie where he's playing a Deep Purple record in college and he accidentally knocks over a bunch of tapes and boxes onto his turntable as it's going during In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and he makes this sound like ooh, which always makes me laugh, that scene.
Yeah, he just like freaks out, like, oh my god, what have I done? And he tries to put on Smoke on the Water or whatever it is, and yeah, just that. Like honestly, if I was in his shoes, I'd probably melt down a little bit like that too. I can't say I'd be the cool, calm, collected one.
No, I mean nobody would be at first because you're talking to nobody. That's such a weird thing, that the radio. You're speaking live to nobody. You have no idea who's listening.
Yeah, like I went to Queens College like back in the like late 90s, and we had like for the longest time we didn't have a radio station until like some people rallied to get one done or get one made up, and we finally got a radio station, but we only broadcasted, I still remember this, out of one speaker in like the basement next to the cafeteria. So like it was a radio station, but unless you were standing underneath that one speaker, like you wouldn't have heard us.
Okay, here's my college radio experience. I had my roommate Eric used to run. He was a late night college DJ at Santa Clara, KSCU in California. And I listen to him, and every so often I go over to the station. I'm say, can I sit in the room when you're broadcasting? This is like midnight. And he's like, no, you can't. It's very much against the rules. The rules of the FCC say you cannot be here. I'm like, fuck that. It's college radio. Who cares? Let me in. So he let me in, and he's like, no one ever calls me. He's like, I have radio contests. I have all this stuff. Nobody has ever once called into my show. And I remember one night I was in the studio with him. I'm like, just for fun, put on a Beatles album instead of college music, just to see if anybody's listening. So he put on like Get Back by the Beatles, which you're not supposed to do because that's not college radio.
Right.
Instantly, his phone rang. One angry listener, why are you playing the Beatles? That's not what college radio is. So I got him his first phone call ever, an angry phone call.
Yay! There you go. Nice.
Yeah, so there you go. That was my contribution to the Federal Communications Committee or whatever.
Oh, man, you're a good friend.
That's what I do. I like to support up-and-coming groups like the Beatles.
Yeah, they could use a boost.
Yeah, so Howard Stern is not doing well in college, and he's not a good DJ. And one night, this is where he's going to meet his wife, Allison, that he's walking home in the rain with some friends, and the rain's coming down real hard, so they have to duck into one of their friends' houses who lives in some brownstone nearby, and they go over there. And this is where Howard will meet the wonderful woman in his life, Allison, a fellow college student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's I'm sorry, I didn't write down the name of the woman that plays it, but yeah, she does a really good job too, and like you could see why Howard fell for her, like just immediately, like love at first sight type of thing.
Yeah, the actress, I wrote it down. Mary McCormick was her name. She played Allison Stern. I don't know anything else about her. I've never seen her in any other movie. I just know that at the time, again, you have to remember when this movie was coming out, Howard Stern had a built-in publicity machine. He had millions of listeners every day. So he would always tell people what we filmed today, what the scene is like, what actors we got. He was hyping people. We got this guy, Paul Giamatti. He's amazing. I love this guy. But he was really high on Mary McCormick, who was a real actress. He's like, I can't believe I get to do scenes with a real actress. So, yeah, this was her big shot. And, again, I've never seen her in anything else, but I think she does fine in the movie.
Yeah, no, she's great. She's great. I like how, like, immediately he tried to pump himself up to talk to her. And I think he made some excuse about, like, him doing a student film for his class. And it's like, oh, you'd be perfect for it. I'd love you to be. Like, you can see that even though he looks the way he looks, and he shouldn't have the confidence he does, but for some reason he like has enough charm and just enough confidence to like ask these girls out. Like there's that one montage where he just keeps on asking girls out and they all say no to him, but he keeps doing it, he keeps persevering. Like it's kind of admirable in a way.
Yeah, if Howard Stern can get a girl, anybody can. That's one way I'd phrase it.
That's right. Chase your dreams, guys.
Well, he does have one thing available to him in college, and this is pointed out in the movie, that he's a student filmmaker, and he tells Allison, you're so beautiful, I want you to be in my movie. So that is a good avenue for people trying to meet girls. Make sure you make student films.
That's it.
And this film he makes is the most pretentious piece of shit I have ever seen in a movie. Where it's like a B.F. Skinner box. It's a tribute to psychology. Rats trapped in a box. It's a guy walking in the park dressed as Jesus. He gets stabbed. Angels are there. He's bleeding, and they're carrying him away. I'm like, what the fuck is this movie?
It's definitely a student film. It's definitely something a college student at the time would think is deep and profound.
And who am I to talk to judge great art? It apparently, according to the movie, it won first prize. And because he was now an award-winning filmmaker, Allison came back to his house and they made out. So that student film got him his wife.
Yeah, but then they cut into like those talking heads where modern day Allison has said like, no, that didn't happen. I didn't make out with him on the first date. Howard likes to embellish. He likes to exaggerate, which is another thing I do like in this movie. Those talking heads interstitials they have throughout the film where they cut to the person in modern day and they kind of give their take on it. I thought that was an interesting little film trick they did throughout.
I actually love that. Yeah, that's a neat little storytelling device, with the asterisk being, if you pay attention, they stop doing it about halfway through the movie. They only do it for half the movie.
Yeah, that's the one thing. That's the one nitpick. Like, I wish they would, like, if you're going to do it, do it. Like, I just wish they would have done it throughout the entire film, but I guess maybe they thought that would take away, because, like, I guess they were just doing that till they got up to, quote-unquote, modern day, and like which is them in New York, and so they just kind of like when they get to New York, they kind of stop doing it. And I was like, you could have you could have done more of it. Like, I don't know why you just kind of decided not to do it, but
My guess is they had way too much material because this movie is light and silly and very, it's airy. It goes quick, but it's still almost a 2 hour movie. So they must have had a lot of material they had to cut.
yeah, like when I saw the time, it was like, oh, this is almost 2 hours, but it doesn't feel like 2 hours at all. It's 2 hours at all.
Yeah, not at all. And especially once Paul Giamatti shows up, it flies. Okay.
Indeed.
So you talked about the interstitials where they go and they show a talking head commenting on the movie. There's a whole set of interstitials in this movie, and if you don't know Howard Stern, you might not really understand the significance of these interstitials. These are where Baba Booey comes and he introduces what the next part of the movie is going to be. Now that sentence makes sense to me. That will not make sense to a lot of people. Please explain who Baba Booey is and why him introducing things is important.
So Baba Booey, Gary Delabate, who's the show's producer, right?
Yeah, he was Howard's producer, yeah.
Howard's produced for a long time. He got the nickname. I still remember how he got the nickname because he was into collecting animated cartoon cells for a while. And like he was like talking about how he got these new Hanna-Barbera ones. And he's like, oh yeah, I got Yogi Bear, I got Huckleberry Hound, I got Quick Draw McGraw and Baba Booey. And then I think somebody said, wait, no, I think the character's name is Baba Louie, not Baba Booey. And he's like, no, it's Baba Booey, I'm sure. And they looked it up, and it was Baba Louie. And they kept making fun of him because of it, because like, oh, he loves this art so much, he doesn't even know the name of it. And oh, Baba Booey, and they just kept calling him Baba Booey, and all the listeners called in calling Baba Booey, and it just became this whole thing where his nickname just stuck. It became Baba Booey. People just scream Baba Booey to him in the street, and like to this day, I think people just like screaming Baba Booey just to him and to anybody that'll listen.
Yeah, this was very much a thing in the late 90s, and I don't know so much now. Like you said, people still do it, but Howard's not as well known anymore. But yeah, it became a thing where Larry King and these people that would have live call-in phone shows back in the 90s, it became a game if Howard Stern fans could get past the screeners, because they'd get on the air and they'd pretend they had something to talk to Larry King about, and then they'd just scream, Baba Booey, Baba Booey, and it became a game, and it was one of the funniest things.
It was wow! What a time to be alive! It really was. It really was something else.
I gotta say this. Okay, one of the funniest things that ever came out of Howard Stern was, when something bad happens in the news, where someone famous dies, or there's like building collapses, or 9/11, like there's a huge news event, and CNN would open their phone calls to live viewers. It became a game for Howard Stern callers to get in during these huge disaster moments and do a prank phone call and say Baba Booey like in the middle of 9/11 coverage. This was very much a thing, and I could not have found that any funnier.
And so many people just tried to get that phrase out to wherever they could. Like you said, like call-in shows. If there was like a reporter doing like a newscast on the street, somebody would walk behind and be like, Baba Booey, Baba Booey. Like it got obnoxious almost to a point, but it was hilarious still.
I remember in his book, there's one guy Howard had named Captain Janks, who was the king of all prank phone calls. And this is not in the movie, but you should read his book if you like the movie. It's even funnier. But there's a whole chapter on Captain Janks' greatest phone hits and people he managed to get. And they love to call in to like public access TV shows. People would just open the phone lines live. And I remember Captain Janks once had it set up where he was 4 callers in a row, and he Baba Booeyed them on all 4 callers, and the guy got so pissed.
Jesus Christ. Wow.
I love this stuff.
That is phenomenal. 4 in a row. That's wow. That's like the turkey in bowling.
Yeah, this is the kind of comedy I miss in the world. People disrupting live TV broadcasts.
It's a lost art.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is Howard's producer, Gary Delabate, Baba Booey, they know him as, and every so often when the movie will transition to a new scene, Baba Booey comes out and he'll say, this is the scene where Howard goes to Westchester or Howard goes to Washington, D.C. And if you know who he is, it's really funny. And again, at the time when I saw this in the theater, the crowd would go nuts every time. Baba Booey! They'd just scream at every Baba Booey appearance. So, yeah, that's what these scenes are here for.
Yeah, like I think Howard knew enough to like put like people like Gary in it just for the fans. Like there's that one scene where they show him going to Hartford and they have like Crackhead Bob and Nicole Bass show up, and like I'm sure the audience went wild for that.
I was wondering when we got to the crackhead Bob scene how we were going to describe that to people who don't know who that is.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have just said it like that. But that was a nickname.
Yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. Okay.
We'll get there. We'll get
So
there.
here's Howard's first job. He goes to Westchester, New York, his first job interview in March of 77. And his first job interview is he goes and there's this little Middle Eastern program director who instantly, the minute Howard walks into the radio station, this station director fires the DJ for being late and says, "Fuck you in the ass 1,000%," which I love that line. And he says, "Howard, you want a job? You're fired. You're hired." So Howard gets a job immediately just because the guy gets fired as he's walking in.
Yeah, just like that's how easy it was, I guess.
Yes. So his first job is at Westchester 107, and again we get more of the high-pitched old Howard Stern voice when he was a teenager or a young man. And I wrote this down. I'll do the impression. Westchester 107, WRNW 107. Hi, this is the Howard Stern Experience. It is 75 degrees presently. Winds out of the northwest.
Yeah, no one ever talked to him about his voice. Like, why are you talking like that? You don't.
He's just terrible.
Wow.
Yeah, so Howard does his best at this new job. He's not especially good at it, and the project manager eventually, the program director eventually pulls him aside and says, "Howard, you stink. I don't mince words. You will never make it in radio. You do not have a good voice or a good personality, but I make you station manager." So Howard becomes the station manager, and this actually goes pretty well, right? Because he's making pretty good money. This is where he marries Allison.
Yeah, he's able to make more money, marry Allison, and he's kind of like a respected guy. But I did. It was interesting they showed a scene like that where he showed he really wasn't happy with it when he had to fire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, that's a bummer. Like he fired someone, but he immediately had to go home and throw up after because it just left him with a bad feeling in his stomach.
Yeah, that's the career path. The station director wants Howard to become a manager. Howard doesn't want to, and Howard can't because he can't fire somebody. He can't, some DJ making $90 a week supporting his family. Howard doesn't feel right firing this guy. So he's like, even though it pays more to be a manager, I have to be on the air. I just have to.
Right, exactly. And then so he quits, and then that's when he goes to Hartford.
Yes, here we go. We get to introduce Crackhead Bob. So, Darin, who is Crackhead Bob, and what is his significance to the Howard Stern program?
Oh boy. He's how should I say this?
Just spit it out. Come on, you got the radio voice. Go for it.
He's a member of what he was a member. I think he's passed away at this point, but he was a member of the Whack Pack,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a sort of a collection of people that were maybe society thought were a little odd. I'll say. I'm walking a fine line right now.
That's okay. It's a Howard Stern movie. We have a little more leeway on this episode.
Yeah, so like he's a person who did so much crack that he kind of like he sort of created this like certain or permanent speech impediment through all his use of crack use, and so but like Howard Stern really liked him and thought it was funny, and like he sort of became a regular on the show a lot, and the fans loved him, and he sort of became part of the Howard Stern family a little bit. I think I say that right.
You did good. That was very good. You walked that fine line diplomatically. Yeah. So, like Darin said, there was a group of fans called the Whack Pack who just are very odd people. Crackhead Bob was one of the most prominent ones. He'd call in all the time. And like Darin said, yeah, he did so much crack, he fried his brain and ended up with a speech impediment. But his speech impediment was unintentionally funny, so they put him on the air.
Yes.
Yeah. So perhaps not something they would do today, but at the time it was quite amusing.
Yeah, at the time it was quite amusing.
So here we go. Howard's going to get his job in Hartford. He's going to quit that first station, go to Hartford, Connecticut. He's going to work for a station called WCCC. And we get the Baba Booey introduction where we have Baba Booey and Crackhead Bob himself introducing this segment. I will try my best to imitate Crackhead Bob, and I do this out of love because I love this guy.
Go for it.
Baba Booey says, all right, say Howard goes to Hartford and becomes the wacky morning man at WCCC. And this is the best I can do. Crackhead Bob repeats that as, Howard goes Hartford, don't think, think, think. And Baba Booey's like, no, try that again. He goes, he's the wacky morning man at WCCC. And Crackhead Bob's like, Howard Mac ding ding ding. So anyway, that's Crackhead Bob.
Perfect.
Poor guy. But Howard made him famous, and he probably made some money, and probably made more money out of this show than he would have otherwise. So
yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
Okay, so Howard's experience at WCCC, he comes in there, and the first day on the job, he's running in, he's all harried, he's like late for work, and he sits down. And this is where we're going to meet a very prominent member of the Howard Stern team, Fred Norris, who was with Howard forever. He was my personal favorite member of the Stern team back in the day. I love this guy. And explain Fred Norris to people. Who is he?
Fred Norris. How can you explain him? He's all things to all people. Like he's kind of, I mean, he's I don't want to say he's Howard's sidekick because that kind of sounds a little demeaning, but he's so much more than that. He's like the sound guy. He's dialed into Howard's sense of humor. I think he makes Howard like funnier and better in a lot of instances, and he's always quick with like the right sound clips and sound cues, and he's basically I guess Howard's right-hand man in a weird way.
Yeah, he was almost a producer, almost like Baba Booey, that he ran Howard's soundboard. He was the supporting cast behind Howard. If Howard needed a noise, a voice, anything, Fred was right there. So very important and very amusing because in real life, Fred Norris, they would make fun of him on the show. He has no personality whatsoever. In the movie, they say he's like wallpaper. You can't get a read on him. And it's really funny because he plays himself in the movie, and that's literally how he plays himself, just has no personality. And it's one of the funniest characters in the movie just because he's so blank.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. Like when he's on the radio, he turns it on, and he's a lot more animated. But yeah, there's also when you see him off the air, or he's just kind of whatever. Like he's just like just nothing there. He's like a manila envelope, just bland as bland can be.
Yeah, and you get a lot of laughs out of that in the movie, just how blank he is and how Howard can't play off him. So he meets Fred here. Fred helps him out on his first day, and they're going to become a team. And we get a little montage of Howard and Fred working together, trying to make this show work. And we do get one of the turning points in the movie where Howard is supposed to read an ad copy for a place called Stanley Sports, and he can't find the ad copy. He can't find the actual advertisement to read, so he just has to make it up, and this is something Howard is good at. So he's talking about, I went to Stanley Sports as a kid. I loved it. My dad took us there. We didn't have a lot of money. It was amazing. And then Fred finds the copy and hands it to him, and Howard says, oh, here it is, and there's only one Stanley Sports, and it opens this week. And Howard's like, oh, I just lied to you guys. Sorry about that. And he's like, and he kind of drops his guard, drops his show for a second, and just starts apologizing. He's like, I'm just a DJ making $100 a week. I'm doing my best. And for some reason, Allison says, when you did that today, that was really good, and this really opened something in his mind.
Yeah, you could definitely, like, it's like you said, like when he dropped the veneer and dropped the persona and was like relaxed enough to be himself, like that's something. I mean, especially at that time, that a lot of people didn't hear very often because, I mean, now we have like all these podcasts and everybody's kind of themselves on it, so you're able to hear people's kind of honest opinions and honest voices and whatnot. But back in the day, people you had to put on your radio voice and you had to, put on the facade. So to see that facade drop in that moment, that was really interesting, and because it just didn't happen that often.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't know about you, I personally learned a lot of lessons about how to podcast, how to be in an interview and stuff, I learned this stuff from Howard Stern over the years. And that's one of them. Just if you're yourself, it's way more interesting than if you're putting on a persona. If you're just, sharing your normal thoughts, because people relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be who you are. Be yourself, guys.
Yeah, and then the other one is that I remember specifically, Howard would be really good at getting his guests to drop their guard and just be very candid with him. And I remember him explaining this once. He's like, because normally what happens is they'll come in the room and there's a pre-interview and everyone's doing small talk, and then you start recording the show. He's like, a lot of times I'd bring in the guest and I wouldn't tell them we were on the air. They think it's the pre-interview. And so they're just talking normal. And he's like, I would catch them off guard so often. They're like, oh, I didn't even know we were on the air. And he's like, that's why it was so good, because you were being yourself. And this is something I learned with my podcasts. it should never feel like it's a show. It should really just feel like it's two people having a conversation and you're listening in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like Mark Maron does that too, because like I listen to his podcast quite a bit, and like whenever he starts his podcast, they're always kind of mid conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and like sometimes you'll hear the other person be like, "Oh, did we start? Are we recording?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I recorded. I started like 20 minutes ago." So it's like it is a good way to ease people into a more relaxed state, and just so you can get more of an honest back and forth and dialogue going, and it's not as like fake and phony.
Yeah, and I think that the thought process there is you don't want to gotcha. You don't want to like surprise the guest, but you're trying to bring out their most natural self where they're the most comfortable. I think that would be his logic.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so Howard's starting to get going in WTC in Hartford, and this is his first downfall. He's about to lose his wife, Allison. She's going to separate because of the movie premiere moment. So I will give you the honors on this one. This is a fun scene. What happens to Howard that gets Allison to perhaps not trust him around women anymore?
Okay, so in this part, the radio show is doing well. They have a little bit of heat, a little bit of buzz, and to the point where there was this movie coming out with this B-list actress, Brittany Fairchild.
Mm-hmm.
Did an interview on the radio show, and they wanted to comp Howard and Friends tickets to the premiere. So they go out. Apparently, Howard walks the red carpet with her to the movie premiere, and they sit in the movie theater, and this very lovely actress comes on to our young Howard Stern, hands on the thighs, hands on the legs, and whatnot. And yeah,
I do love that scene. I should point out they had to bring in a stunt penis for this scene. I looked it up in the IMDb trivia that Brittany Fairchild puts her hand on Howard's thigh, and you instantly see something become stiff in his pants, and that was indeed a stunt penis. That was a little metal thing.
Oh, okay. I mean, I figured, because like there's no way your penis is that good an actor that it can just on command like that. But yeah. So basically, the actress Brittany Fairchild says, "Hey, Howard, can you take me home? Like I'm feeling kind of tired." So they go home together. Fred is still with them. Fred follows them throughout this whole thing, and which so odd. But yeah, she lets him into her apartment, and she's like, "Hey, you guys can hang out here. I'll be right back." And then she starts to undress and disrobe, and gets into the tub, her bathtub, and calls Howard in. And he goes in, and he's like, "Hey, could you rub my back? Like my back really hurts." And of course, Howard's like, "This is inappropriate. I can't do this. I'm a married man." And then she says, "Well, if you get in here with your underwear on, it's not cheating," which I don't think that's correct.
I'll ask my wife about that. I'm guessing she would not agree with that.
Yes, but Howard succumbs and he does it, and Fred jumps in the tub too. So Fred just pops. At no point do anyone say, "Hey, Fred, what are you doing? Stop, get out!" But Fred hops in the tub with them as Howard, rubs her back, and of course he's feeling the feelings, but he, as Brittany comes on to him more and more, he's like, you know what? No, I gotta go. This is wrong. And then he gets out of the tub in his tighty whities, and he drives home. He like wrings out his underwear, puts it underneath the front seat of his car, and Fred is still in the tub, by the way. He's still hanging out.
Well, Fred got some that night. Fred did well.
My man. So then the next day, Allison uses the car to go grocery shopping, and she finds his soggy tighty whities underneath the seat, and she's none too pleased.
Yeah, okay, a couple things about this scene. This is a really long, famous scene where when I saw this in the theater, I always remember stuff like this. Which moment got the biggest laugh in the theater? For some reason, I always remember stuff like that, where Howard's in this girl's hotel room, and she's undressing in front of him and going to the bath. "Howard, please rub my back hurts." And Howard's like, "Oh my God, like what is this woman doing?" And I remember Fred just looks over at her cabinet with all her drinks, and he's like, "Hey man, free drinks." That got the biggest laugh in the theater. Fred had nothing to do with the sex scene. He just liked the free drinks.
Again, my man.
Yeah, so Howard has been lured into a bathtub by a pretty girl. He doesn't technically cheat on Allison, but he came really close. And then he leaves, and Allison finds his wet underwear. Why you would leave the wet underwear in the car, I don't know. Like, just throw them in a dumpster. I don't like.
Just throw it away. Like underwear is not that expensive.
Yeah, so Allison catches him, and she's very furious, and she dumps him. So he will have no wife here. And so Howard, this is a down point in his life. He loses his wife. Fred ended up having sex with Brittany Fairchild instead, which is a bummer because Fred has no game, but somehow he did it. So Howard is at the bottom of his life here, and he leaves this job in Westchester, and he goes to Detroit. And this is one of the better laughs in the scene where he's like, I'm just pissed. He's like, my life was in the gutter. I went to this new job in Detroit. They promised me a new building. I got there was no new building. The DJ before me called me Big Bird, made fun of me, and so Howard is just pissed. He's just pissed at life, and this is where he's going to develop the Howard Stern persona. Because he gets on the air his first day in Detroit, and he does something which perhaps might be a little offensive to some people.
A little bit.
Would you like to do this one, or do you want me to do this one?
Well, yeah, he creates this sort of, like I say, like this sort of this pro-black militant character who's also the traffic announcer, and the traffic reporter, and like. He does it into his megaphone to make it sound like he's in a traffic helicopter, and like of course before he gets to traffic he tells this poem about killing the white man.
Yes. All right, let me just take a step back into the big picture. So Howard has just gone to Detroit, which is tenuous race relations at best, probably in the late 70s. That's one of the cities where perhaps race humor may not go over super well. And his first day on the air, he invents Mama Look-a-Boo-Boo Day, the first black weather lady, when her whole shtick is kill the white man, kill the white man, which Howard's station manager is not super thrilled about this.
Yeah, separate the art from the artist, man.
But I love this whole stretch of movie where Howard just does not care. He's so pissed that his radio career isn't working out and his wife left him. And this is probably my favorite laugh in this movie, even though it's kind of subtle, where the station manager's like, look, you're terrible, Howard. You're not good. No one listens to you. You have no advertisers. Besides, also, you're not doing it correctly. I want you to say the time and the weather every 15 minutes. He says 4 times every 15 minutes you have to say the time and the temperature. So Howard takes that very literally, and I just love this little trolling here where Howard's on the air one day and he's telling a story. He's like, my grandmother, she died last night. It was the saddest thing. I was in the hospital and, I saw the life drain out of her. By the way, it's 58 degrees out at 6:45 p.m. Anyway, her head went through the windshield of a car.
That was hilarious. I will give you that.
Now that's my style of humor right there. And you see the station manager put his head in his hand and his head over his head. He's like, oh my God.
Yeah, he also got like the dominatrix weather lady to be part of the show too.
This is another member of the Whack Pack. Do you remember her, Irene, the the leather lady?
I don't remember her.
Yeah, she would come on the air and she would give the weather. And Howard, again, this is real. She was on the air. This is a real woman, and she'd come on and talk about how she was torturing some guy's nipples with clamps. She'd give the weather. She was a real dominatrix, and he had her on the air all the time.
Wow, I gotta see when this came out, because like I do remember, like a little bit of a tangent to my podcast, SNL Nerds. There was an SNL sketch about the leather weather report where it had like I think it was like season 6 of SNL where they had like Denny Dillon as a dominatrix.
Oh yeah.
Giving the weather report while I think it was like Charles Rocket was like chained to the weather map in a gimp mask.
Wow, what a deep pull this is. But yeah, you're right. I remember that now.
Yeah, so I do. Now that you mentioned, I wonder like, oh, was this inspired by that or vice versa? Interesting.
We asked the hard-hitting questions here on Staff Picks.
Yes, we do.
So Howard is slowly shaping his persona, where he just talks and he's himself on the air, and there's just nothing will stop him. He'll say whatever, he'll do whatever, because he just doesn't care, because the old way isn't working. And again, in DC, he shaves his, or in Detroit, he shaves his mustache, he kind of changes his look. Allison eventually comes back with him, and this is the thing where it might go well here in Detroit, but what happens, and I remember this from his book, they change genres on him overnight. They're like, we're going to be a country station now. And Howard's like, I'm not being a DJ of a country station. So he leaves. And so this is going to open the whole second half of the movie, where he's now Howard Stern, where he's like, Allison, now that you're back with me, I promise I'll be with you. I'll be faithful. I will never cheat on you. But whatever job I have in the future, I have to go all the way with it. I cannot hold back. And she's like, wait, you were holding back before? And he's like, yeah, I got to go all the way. And she's like, okay. And that's probably not good advice from Allison.
Yeah, I think she said that not knowing what that really meant. Like, him going all the way. Like, I'm sure she didn't think, oh, my husband's gonna get, like, massage from topless women on the air one day, and I'll have to be cool with it.
Yeah, perhaps there should have been a written contract of some sort between Howard and Allison.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
So anyway, there's only really 2 parts left in the movie. Howard's going to go to Washington, D.C. He's going to become a big deal there. Then he's going to end up in New York at NBC, and those are the last 2 parts. But I don't want to gloss over this first part in Washington, D.C. He goes to a channel called DC 101 in March of 1981, an FM rock station. And his program director is Allison Janney. We will see her hate his guts repeatedly. But the big takeaway here in D.C. is this is where he says, this is where I met the other woman in my life, Robin Quivers.
Ba-ba-da.
Explain Robin Quivers to people.
Robin Quivers, she has a news background. She was on DC to be the newswoman, and she got paired up with Howard. And they've been together ever since. Like, I think Howard even says that, like, my show needs Robin Quivers. I can't do the show without her. Like, she's like the level-headed one that kind of grounds him and makes sure that he doesn't go too far off the edge, because she's sort of become like the yin to his yang, as it were.
Yeah, and this is something that was written about a lot at the time, and we'll bring it up again. So Howard Stern was the guy who there was no boundaries. Anything was fair game. He would often get accused of being racist, being sexist, being a pig, being a jerk. But he always had a trump card in his back pocket because he's got Robin there with him. So you can't say that he's sexist because his number 2 in command is a woman, and she was just as funny as him a lot of the time.
Right.
And you can't also say he was racist because she was black. This was a very important variable at the time, and this was written about a ton at the time. Howard kind of created a get-out-of-jail-free card for himself because he has a built-in excuse. I can't be any of those things because Robin is here with me.
Very true.
Yeah, this was a big deal. And I love Robin. I loved her on the air. She was so funny. I love her voice. I love how quick she is. I just love everything about her. And then she plays herself in this movie. And I was amazed when I saw this movie how good she is at playing herself.
Yeah, no, she's solid. She's got some acting chops. Again, this is her first time acting as well in a movie, and she holds her own for sure.
Yeah, she's great. So the first conversation is Robin is paired with him, and this is how it would have worked back on DJs back in the day. They introduced the records, they talk to the audience, and then when it's time for the news, you go to your news person. So there was always 2 people. So he's paired with Robin just randomly. They'd never met before. And the very first day on the air, he just starts talking to her, bantering with her, which apparently was something you weren't supposed to do, right?
Yeah, like that part kind of threw me, but I guess it makes sense. But yeah, it seems like your news person and who you were at the DJ were like 2 total separate entities. Like the news person would do their news and you would do your DJ stuff. And never the twain shall meet.
Yeah.
So the fact that, Howard actually talked to Robin and asked her questions, was like, what are you doing? You don't do that. That's unheard of.
Yeah, that's one of the big groundbreaking things about Howard Stern, for all the notoriety that he came up into later. But yeah, a lot of the stuff, it was groundbreaking. He would do these things that no one was doing, and that that's actually kind of a cool job. Like the very first scene here, and this is pretty true to life. I remember he told the story before that Robin's there the first day, and he's like, Robin, did you get laid last night? And she just looks at him like, what? And he's like, I didn't get laid last night. It's been a while. He goes, I don't even know if I should be talking about this. She's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't. Like, she'll just go with it. And then he says, well, I read this book by this guy who apparently banged 16,000 women. And he said, the key is have tight pants and put a bulge in there so women will be attracted. And she's like, oh, really? That's the key? And he's like, yeah, well, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. He had sex with 16,000 women. And Robin, just right off the cuff, says, wait a minute, if he had sex with 16,000 women, he wouldn't have time to put pants on.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, yeah. All right. Good point.
And Howard loved that. He's like, oh, my God, she actually went with the bit and came up with something that was funnier than I could have, and he just loves her.
Yeah, no, she kind of goes with it all, and, I think she's one of the few people that kind of gets what Howard is trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think, a lot of times with in this movie, he keeps saying he's misunderstood. No one really gets what he's trying to do. No one really sees the vision. I think Robin is one of the few people early on that saw the vision.
Yeah, and we even get a talking head of her here saying exactly what you just said. She's like, I don't know why I talked back to him. I just did. And she was like, and we just had something. And she's like, I knew I shouldn't do this. I was going to get in trouble, but we just had a dynamic and I just went with it. And here we are.
Yep. Millionaires.
Yeah, so there's a little long section here where the program directors in D.C. are none too thrilled with Howard's new shtick. They're like, did he say horny on the air? Did he say penis? And so Allison Janney, of course, and her flunky in command, they have to tell them, they're like, Howard and Robin, we can't do this. You can't talk to each other. They're like, Howard, don't sing along with the music. Don't criticize Washington, D.C. It's bad for radio. So they lay down all these rules. And they eventually separate Howard and Robin. They put her in a little booth so she can't talk to Howard. But that doesn't stop him. He still talks to her anyway.
Yeah, he still kind of pushes on through. I think he tells her some cockamamie story about being in Vietnam and shooting down school kids or something like that. And just some over-the-top insane story where if you're thinking about it, you realize, well, he can't be serious. He wasn't old enough to be in Vietnam. He's obviously, this is all horseshit. But Robin goes along with it, and it's just hilarious.
I have to repeat the story that he tells her just because this one is so funny to me. I'll do it short. So Howard's talking in the middle. She's doing her newscast one day, and he just interrupts her. Says, it's a story about Vietnam or something. And he's like, Robin, I was in Vietnam. And you can see in Robin's eyes, she's like, bullshit, you weren't in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So Howard tells the story that, yeah, I was in Nam, and I got to tell you, I still have a beef with the U.S., with the government because they're mad at me. They didn't give me credit for my kills. And she's like, what kills? He's like, they said I killed 11 people in Vietnam, but it should be way more because I took a grenade and I threw it into a schoolhouse, and I killed 200 kids. She's like, you did not throw a grenade. He's like, I did. And I was mad because I said that should count as 200 kills. But they said, no, because they were kids, it's one kill. And he's like, and I'm still mad at the government to this day. So they have a...
Yeah, and then she's like, well, what platoon were you in? It's like, oh, what platoon were you in? It's like the 1305. It's like, yeah, that was me. Yeah, 1305. Yeah. The Army. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I can just imagine the program directors being horrified that this is what's coming out of their radio channel, a highly respected radio channel in D.C., arguing over if you should get credit for killing school children with grenades or not.
Yeah, it's, oh boy.
Anyways, yeah, so needless to say, the station starts losing sponsors. They lose Muffler King, they lose everybody, and Allison Janney and them are furious at Howard, and Howard's like, well, we'll lose these sponsors, but we'll gain an audience. And once the audience is there, we'll get more sponsors. Just trust me. And they're like, no, that's not how it works. So this will become the thing, the long-running battle between Howard and radio program directors. Do the ends justify the means for ratings?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good. And we have one more scene here. This will be probably the most uncomfortable scene to talk about in the movie, the orgasm scene.
Oh, yeah. You got to talk about it.
All right. Darin's tapping out on this one.
Yeah.
All right. This is what I do for you people. I will explain the scene. So Howard, one day, He is on the air just doing his shtick, and this is in Washington, D.C. He's not quite the big shot he is yet. He's just gaining notoriety. This will do it. One day this woman calls in and says, Howard, I love you. I just love you so much. When I listen to you, I touch myself. And over to the side, we see Robin rolling her eyes. And that's what makes the scene work. Robin cannot handle this woman. She hates these women. So Howard's like, well, honey, what do you look like? She's like, well, I look like Farrah Fawcett. I'm 36, 24, 36, blonde hair. And over to the side, you have Robin, the doubting Thomas, saying, we have the most beautiful audience. I just love that line. Howard's like, shut up, Robin, shut up. She's really hot. I know she is. So she's like, I just wish I could have sex with you, Howard. And Howard's like, oh, well, I can arrange that. And this is a real thing that happened. I know he wrote about it in his book, where he convinces her to pull down her speaker, her giant subwoofer, take her clothes off, straddle it, and he will vibrate it with his mouth and lips over the radio, where it will vibrate and give her an orgasm live on the radio.
Yeah. And damn it if he doesn't do it.
Again, when I say the 90s was much different than the 2020s, this is what I'm talking about. You would hear this on the radio.
I mean, my God, this was just wild.
Yes. So he literally does this, and you just get a montage of all these people out in the public listening to this during their workday. You see cars pulling off the side of the road to listen to this woman having an orgasm live on the air. Oh, my God. Yeah, this is Howard Stern in a nutshell right here.
Yeah, just like tons of people listening. I think one person almost drives off the road. Just pandemonium.
Yeah, so it happens, and Howard gives her an orgasm, and you hear it, and everyone starts applauding him. All the sound engineers, they're cheering for Howard because no one's ever seen anything like this on the radio before. And the station managers, perhaps not thrilled about this one.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, they're doing their job.
Yeah, like more sponsors are leaving. But I think this is the point where they notice that like the ratings are starting to go up a little bit.
Yeah. That was the thing. They're losing sponsors, but all of a sudden Howard's ratings within like a week or a month are shooting up because of stunts like this. And they're like, oh, my God. And all of a sudden these other sponsors are calling in begging to be on the show. So they're like, oh, my God, Howard Stern is actually succeeding in radio. They can't believe it.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
And then Howard's like, well, if the show's starting to take off, I want to expand the show. I want to hire some new people. Can you bring in people? And they're like, who? And Howard's like, I know this guy at Hartford. He does voices. He does comedy bits. He's so funny. And we're talking about Fred, of course, who's dry as wallpaper. They're like, I guarantee you, we'll go up 2 rating points, full rating points, if you hire this guy. And the station manager's like, this guy must be hot. And Howard's like, this guy is total personality. He's electric.
Cut 2. Fred Norris.
Yes. Fred just standing there at a bus stop holding a box. And I remember the audience just went insane at this moment.
Fred!
Yeah, okay, so a couple things here where Howard's show is really going to take off in D.C. here with Fred and Robin now. And in fact, did you catch this? At one point they show a billboard for him in D.C. and it says, Howard Stern, D.C. 101, are you coming?
Oh, God, I missed that. Whoa.
Yeah, that was his tagline.
Damn. Wow. Woo. That's a wild take.
Here is something I want to talk about. This does not feature real heavily in the movie, but there's a scene here where he's doing lesbian dating game. And they really gloss over to the movie, but I do have to talk about this. Because anybody who knows from back in the day, Howard had a catchphrase, the secret of radio, and I will spare you having to say it yourself. Lesbians equal ratings. That was his catchphrase. And we see it here. He's doing Dial a Date where lesbians call in and try to date each other. And this got a lot of flack at the time. Do you remember this?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, yeah, he writes about it in the book, and I remember this, that a lot of people did not like that he was openly discussing lesbians having sex on the air. And Howard would say, well, yeah, it's for ratings, blah, 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 but lesbians are people too. Why can they not have dating games like everyone else does? And he would argue very strongly when he says in the movie, I am the hero of the lesbian community. But he argued in his book, I can't tell you how many gay people wrote in to me over the years and said, I love that you let us do dating games on your show. He had gay one and he had lesbian one. And it caused a lot of shock at the time because this was not what you'd hear on the radio. But Howard would say, You should see all the fan mail I got over the years from these people who, like, I actually got to hear people like me do these dating games.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he's not joking when he says I am the hero of the lesbian community. He actually, at the time, really made a case that I was very progressive in what I was doing.
Yeah. Howard Stern, ally.
I mean, that's the thing. It sounds silly, but he would make the argument that he was.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I don't remember anybody else giving that community a platform at that time, for sure. So, yeah.
So, but yeah, we don't see that too much in the movie. We just see a little clip. But that was a large portion of his audience. He really got the gay and lesbian audience at the time, and that's. But yeah, he doesn't really get credit for that. Although in the middle of lesbian dating game, his wife calls in and says she's pregnant, and this is going to be a big plot point in a minute here, where yeah, she's pregnant. His life is going well, and I think this is where he goes to number one in the ratings in DC. And like he always does, he would always have a huge rally whenever he went to number one.
Right. I remember those.
Yeah. And this was the thing. We only see 2 in the movie, but he did dozens of these over the years.
Yeah, they were quite the event, to say the least.
Do you remember? I guess I have to tell the story. Do you remember? I think it's in his second book, Miss America, the story about the disc jockey from Philadelphia that he knocked out of number one, John DeBella.
Oh, that sounds familiar. I think I remember this. Yeah.
Okay, let me point out to people why Howard Stern was so hardcore. So back in the day, they would move him into a new market. He would say, I'm going to take over this market. I'm going to be number one. And all the DJs who were there said, no, Howard Stern's a joke. He'll never take over. And in Philadelphia, there was this guy, John DeBella, who had been number one for like 20 years, and he was a fixture. And he said, there's no way Howard Stern will go to number one. If he does, I'll eat a dead dog's dick.
Oh, God.
So anyway, it was very personal. And when Howard eventually went to number one in Philadelphia, they had a funeral. They posed a mock funeral where they brought out a corpse that looked like John DeBella. And they said, you're dead now. Howard Stern owns you. Howard Stern, you're now his bitch. Not only that, but he took John DeBella's ex-wife and he got her on dial-a-date with his whack pack just to humiliate the guy.
Jesus H.
Yeah, Howard Stern did not play.
Oh, my God. Scorched the earth.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out this was very much a tradition, him moving into a market, becoming number one, having a big rally in honor of himself, and just embarrassing the hell out of whoever he beat.
Wow. So you buried the lead there. Did John DeBella end up eating a dead dog's dick? Or
I do not have evidence of that. I would suspect he did not.
See, he's not a man of his word.
Yeah, he's a liar, too.
He's a damn liar.
He's a loser and a liar.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's in Howard Stern's second book. There's a big, long section on how he destroyed this guy.
Jesus.
Okay, so here we go. So Howard Stern is doing really well. He can do no wrong. He's just scorching earth, everything. But this is the miscarriage scene where he really gets the first chink in his armor here.
Yeah, this was rough.
Yeah, explain this one to people.
Yeah, well, like you said, Howard's wife, Allison, got pregnant. Then they're sort of basking in all the fame he's gotten. They're looking at the rally on TV, but then Allison feels something in her stomach. She feels like something's wrong, something doesn't feel right, and they go to the doctor, and unfortunately, she had the miscarriage and loses the baby. And then, of course, she's very distraught. Howard's there to comfort her, and of course, he comforts her in his own way by, kind of slowly making kind of jokes, trying to make her laugh, try to make her feel anything other than sadness. And like she does laugh a little bit here and there about it. Cut to the next day where, Howard talks about the miscarriage on the air, and he makes jokes about it on the air as well. Like he has, I guess he has this one segment where God is the weatherman of the show. Mm-hmm. And he has the voice of God telling him how the baby's with him now, and he's not a real man because he couldn't get his wife pregnant. And and Allison did not take kindly to that.
Yeah, this will be a recurring theme over the years. Howard Stern would often joke about his home life, and Allison did not like it. And this was the first incident. This is a real thing that happened. That he did the miscarriage, and Howard's doing the God weatherman segment the next day, and they have a baby crying in the background, and God is like, "That's your son. He's up here with me, you loser." And yeah, Allison didn't like that.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the segment, I think Howard tells Fred to like play a song, play us out, and he plays taps. And so don't play that. And so, but then he plays another song. But then when the next song is playing, the camera holds on him a little bit, and you kind of see this look in Howard's face, like, oh, did I mess up there? Was that the right thing to do? Like maybe I shouldn't have done that. Like you see a little bit of doubt in his eyes for a little bit, and then of course he goes home, and Allison is just as she should be, like just furious at him.
Yeah, and you can probably jump right ahead to this may have been one of the reasons their marriage didn't work out. Just repeated incidents like this over the years, and she just couldn't take it eventually.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah, this could have been the first of many things that led to the ultimate breakup.
Okay, so we're basically at the end of the movie here, and again, everyone says, oh yeah, Paul Giamatti, he was the one you remember from that movie. We haven't even met him in this movie yet, and the movie's almost over.
Yep.
So what happens is Howard becomes the number one disc jockey in Washington, D.C., and he basically blows everyone else out of the water. And we cut to New York now, and there's all these suits in NBC Radio, which is the most prestigious radio station in America. And they're like, what happened to our Washington, our programming? And someone said, well, there's this hotshot DJ. He ran us all out of town. He destroys everyone. And they're like, well, can we hire him? So NBC in New York, the most prestigious professional channel in America, hires Howard Stern sight unseen, which is not a good strategy.
Yeah, they gave him like a 3-year deal without even listening to him first. Yeah. That's insane. Like, why would you do that? That's just, like, I don't know much about the radio biz, but I know enough to fucking listen to the dude before I hire him.
Yeah. So Howard gets an offer $150,000 a year in 1982 money. Oh my God. That's like baseball player salary. Yeah, and so he's making that. He gets the most powerful radio signal in the country. They're going to syndicate him around the country. It's the biggest market in the U.S. And again, they've never heard him. And this is going to be a problem. We'll cut to the next scene where when the head of NBC programming finds out who they hired, he fires instantly all of his executives. He's like, are you kidding me? You hired Howard Stern, you idiot. And they fire him, and he fires all his flunkies, and the only program director he has left is a young man named Kenny, played by our friend Paul Giamatti.
Yes, Paulie G.
Yeah, this is amazing. This is only 30 minutes of the movie. Again, 30 minutes of an hour 40 of Paul Giamatti playing a guy named Kenny who has a southern accent. He's from Arkansas, I think, or Alabama. And Howard will eventually name him Pig Vomit because he hates him so much. And the entire last 30 minutes is Kenny trying to break Howard Stern and tame him, and it does not go well ever.
Yeah, because I think Kenny tells the head of NBC, like, look, I can tame him, I can break him. Like either he'll, succumb to us and do he'll do what we want him to do, or he'll get frustrated and leave the contract, and and he'll just break his contract. So either way, we don't have to pay him for it. So it's a win-win for both of us. Like he swears he can like be the one to rein in this madman. And oh, how wrong he was.
It's the old Police Academy plot. You can't quit, but I can't fire you, but I'll make you so crazy you'll quit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Kenny, this is Paul Giamatti's first movie. This was his debut. And again, like I said, Howard Stern was so excited they found this actor. He would hype him for weeks before this movie was ever even done filming. This guy's amazing. You guys are going to love him. To this day, one of the most acclaimed actors around, but it all started in Private Parts. And did you read the trivia who the other actor was they considered for this role?
No. Who was it?
It came down to two people. It came down to the newcomer, Paul Giamatti, or it came down to the old established person that the studio wanted, Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, he was almost Pig Vomit.
Wow, I can see that. I can see him being Pig Vomit. I think he would have killed it. I mean, Paul's great, but yeah, Philip wouldn't have been a bad choice either.
Yeah, he would have had a different energy. He would have been more smug. He would have been more like the manager in Moneyball, kind of just calm. But yeah, Giamatti adds so much energy to this character that he's the one that everyone remembers.
Yes, for sure. It's a standout performance. He exploded on the scene with this role.
Okay, so I'll leave this scene to you. This might be the most famous scene in the movie where Howard Stern comes over to NBC and he meets Kenny. This is Paul Giamatti. And Kenny has a very special mission for him the first day there. He goes, you know, Howard, you don't have a good voice. You don't really have much shtick. You're not especially good. You're funny once in a while, but here's the most important thing. You have to learn how to say the call letters correctly.
Right. And he says listen closely. WNBC. Now you try. WNBC. No. Now you're doing it wrong now there. You got, listen. WNBC. 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 And it's just like this. It's just two men saying NBC over and over again. And it's just like, what is this? This is ridiculous.
It's just this guy Kenny treating Howard Stern like he's a 5-year-old. And Howard hates it. Right off the bat, these two could not hate each other more. And so the WNBC scene is great, and then Giamatti's like, hey, you know, we got this radio man downstairs, Don Imus. He's the #1 disc jockey in New York. Let's go meet him. You can go see what a real DJ looks like.
Oh, Don Imus. I remember those stories about him and Don Imus.
Yeah, see, I wasn't around for the era of Imus. Imus was a big deal, late 70s, early 80s. I didn't know that era. I only know him from Howard Stern talking about him. And I don't think I am exaggerating when I say that Howard Stern talked endless amounts of shit about Don Imus and criticized him and called him a has-been and a old dinosaur hack just about every 5 minutes on his radio show for the next 20 years.
Yeah, it was that's basically it. Like, Don Imus was a big deal in the tri-state area for a while. Howard Stern was like the new guy, and of course, you know, the old guard kind of looks then his nose down at the new kid coming up. So of course, there's always been friction between those two. I mean, I know Don Imus has passed away since then, but the two of them just oil and water. It just never got along. It just always just talked endless amount of shit to each other. It was pretty entertaining. It was pretty great.
Yeah, and there's a scene here in the movie that I remember Howard used to, it was in his book and he talked about it the first time he ever met Imus. And again, remember, Imus is the big shot, Howard's the new guy, and Howard goes to say hi to him, and Imus just slams the door at him and says, fuck off. So right from the start, Howard and Imus were not good friends.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, so here we go. So the never-ending battle between Kenny and Howard is going to start here, where Kenny says, you know, Howard, you're not real funny. You're not good on the radio. He goes, where you were before, that was nothing. Now you're on real radio. Now you have to do characters. He's like, the way Imus gets away with being offensive is he doesn't say the bad word. He says them through a character. So he's like, Howard, why don't you go on the air tonight at 3 a.m. and give me an audition. Give me some characters. I want to see your character work. And this is going to backfire on Kenny pretty spectacularly.
Yeah, because I think one of the he creates these two with Fred, these two sort of feminine gay characters, these new DJs that are just happen to be gay men, and like they do this bit where he's like, oh yeah, you know, the new program manager didn't like the way I say WNBC, so I'm going to practice saying the call letters whilst gargling this cupful of man love. And so, of course, it's actually water, but, you know, it's like a and it is theater of the mind.
The 90s, once again, a wild time where the most respected radio channel in America at 3 a.m, there's Howard Stern and Fred pretending to gargle each other's semen as they say WNBC.
Absolutely.
So anyway, the characters don't go over well. Kenny's not too thrilled about this, and he calls Howard and Fred into his office, and he says this one line he will repeat endlessly, you goddamn motherfuckers.
Mm.
And so there's this whole thing of them doing these characters, and all the NBC complaint lines are lighting up, all these people calling in. So Kenny is so mad. He calls them in. He brings in the lawyers. He's like, you can't do that on the air. This is NBC. And the lawyers say you can't talk about body excretions. You can't talk about flatulence. And one of the lawyers says, according to the FCC, you cannot say the 7 dirty words on the air, which are very famous. And I will quote them. This is a quote. I'm not saying these. I'm saying them in character, like Imus, so it's okay. The 7 dirty words, according to George Carlin, are cocksucker, motherfucker, fuck, shit, cunt, cock, and pussy. So they say, do not say those on the air ever, or you're fired. And Kenny says, welcome to NBC, Howard.
Yes. And of course, when Kenny says you cannot do this in Howard, he takes that as a challenge. So it's like, oh, let me find a way to do this. So that's where we get the match game.
Oh, yeah.
And then we see our first sighting of Jackie the Joke Man Martling on here, too.
Yeah, let me set this up and you can explain it. So Howard, you tell him you can't say 7 words on the air. Howard will instantly find a loophole where he can, because if they're in character and if they're set out of context, it's perfectly fine. So he comes up with the match game, which is an old game show from the 60s, people may know, where blank, you fill in the blanks. And he has Robin on there, he has Fred, and he has another new guest named Jackie the Joke Man Martling, who was a big member of Howard's show at the time, but he has a very limited appearance in the movie.
Yeah, very limited.
Okay, so here we go. The match game is live on the radio. Howard's going to figure out how to say as many dirty words as possible. He has them in a circle, and he says, all right, we're going to fill in the blanks. Blank Willow.
What can we say?
So Robin, of course, says pussy, and then Fred says pussy, and then Jackie says, well, I wrote it in big letters, so it's a big sloppy pussy.
Big, yeah.
So,
good Lord.
We just cut to Kenny, the program director, just furious as he's listening to this because he knows they're getting away with it, saying these bad words on the air.
Right, and then the next word is blank a doodle doo.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's cock.
Yes, there's cock, and then there's big cock, and then Howard says, no, you can't say big cock, I can't have that coming out of your mouth, and Jackie says, wait, I can't say big cock, but you can say big cock coming out of my mouth? So anyway, yeah, Kenny runs down to stop this. He's horrified they're getting away with this.
Yeah, he's like sprinting down the hallways, like just fuming. And because like I think at this point, Kenny also said all of their bits had to be approved by him, like he demanded that. So the fact that they were doing this bit that wasn't approved by him is like, well, so heads are gonna roll. And then he says like, how did this bit get on the air? I didn't approve it. And it's like, oh yeah, I gave it to Fred to give to you. And then Fred's like, oh no, I gave it to Robin to give to you. And Robin's like, oh yeah, I guess I forgot to give it to you. And then Kenny fires Robin on the spot, which I forgot. I didn't even know that happened.
Well, yeah, it's according to the book, it doesn't happen. It's like a amalgamation of a bunch of different events. That Robin was given a leave of absence at one point, but it was because Howard got sent away. They made him take voice lessons or something.
Oh.
Yeah. So it doesn't happen exactly like this, but they kind of combined a bunch of stuff together for the story.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So the whole Ross Buckingham thing never happened either, or?
I'm not sure about that one. Let's talk about that. Yeah. So Robin gets fired because Kenny wants her to take the fall for Howard doing this match game bit. So Robin's gone and she's mad, and Howard's like, I'll get you back, I promise. And then Howard goes home, and his wife's like, well, I feel bad for Robin, but I feel worse for NBC knowing you're going to really dig into him now. And he does. Yeah, so Robin gets replaced by Ross Buckingham, this old, crotchety news guy who they put there to tame Howard a little because he's old and he won't do racy humor. And Howard just makes it his mission to torture this poor guy.
Yeah, like, poor Ross. He's just like an old timey news guy who plays by the old rules, and he's just not used to this new wild and crazy man that is Howard Stern, especially the woman with the kielbasa swallowing.
Okay.
Trick.
Yeah, let me point this. I'll describe this. I guess you probably may not want to. Yeah, Howard eventually gets his old newsman Ross Buckingham to quit because one day he invites a woman known as the kielbasa queen into the studio. And her talent is she can deep throat an entire 13-inch kielbasa. And she does it right in front of Ross Buckingham, this old man, and he is aghast.
Yeah, he's not used to that. And like I think, and also at the time, I think there was like a tour guide coming through showing the radio station, and like so there was like and I actually noticed, like I looked up, the tour guide was Leslie Bibb, who's an actress that's been in a few things.
Oh wow, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, Leslie Bibb is in there. I think she was in like Talladega Nights and Entourage and stuff. But yeah. So we see this woman, deep throating this kielbasa in front of a horrified group of tourists, and an equally horrified newsman, Ross Buckingham.
And I should point out, I don't know if Ross Buckingham was real, but I can tell you the kielbasa queen was real because she was indeed one of the Whack Pack. that was her talent, and she was on the show all the time, that she could literally take a giant kielbasa down the throat and right back up, and had no problem. She loved showing that off for people.
Wow.
That's right.
She must have been very popular.
Very popular, yeah. Okay, so this whole last part of the movie, just Howard against Kenny, Giamatti against Stern, and we get the one scene where Howard one day on the air calls up Giamatti's wife and says, you need to give your husband more sex. He's being real bitchy lately. And Giamatti's not fond of that. And then we have a big famous scene here where Howard gets called into his office and Kenny wants to fight him. And
yeah, that is wild.
Yeah, this is, again, Giamatti reads this better probably than Philip Seymour Hoffman would have, because Giamatti's so animated.
Yeah, I know Philip, he could get like animated and angry like that, but I think Giamatti sells it just a little bit more. Like, I remember Phil being like really good at being really kind of understated and quiet stuff, but like Giamatti can be like that amped up, like that little anger monster in Inside Out, little red rage
Yes.
monster. Like, that's Giamatti. He can get up to there.
Yeah, if you've never seen this movie, just picture Paul Giamatti screaming and red-faced and bug-eyed, and you can probably picture what the scene is like.
Yeah, like he said, like, you are selling the sanctity of my home.
Yeah. Stern, you are the motherfucking Antichrist. It's a Howard's like, look, the reason I do these things is because Robin's not here. Bring Robin back, and I promise I'll behave. And Kenny's so mad. Kenny just absolutely hates him. But eventually, they need a newsman, because there's a scene here where Howard's reading the news and he doesn't know what to do. He just makes fun of the news, and so NBC's like, well, we got to have somebody, and no one wants to work with him. So they eventually hire Robin back, and now we get the final act of the movie where Howard, Robin, Fred, Jackie, the whole team is there. And I think this is where Paul Giamatti in his last stunt puts the red phone in, right? Where if something racy is going on in the air, he can call down to the phone and they'll immediately pull Howard off the air.
Right, yeah. They tell, like, I guess the guy working the board to pick up the red, like, if something questionable happens, to call him and just to dump out and go straight to music and whatnot.
Yeah. And this will culminate in the final Howard moment where Howard has a naked woman in his studio one day, Jenna Jameson, very famous naked woman.
Yes.
And Howard is going to get a body massage from her as she's fully nude, which is a first in radio, a fully nude woman giving a body massage. And
never been done before.
Never been done before. Unbelievably. And Kenny is horrified. So Kenny picks up, or he calls down to the red phone, says, pull this bit off the air instantly. And Howard gets pulled off the air, and it will culminate in basically Howard going upstairs to his office, and he basically gets in a fist fight with Kenny live on the air.
Yeah, and actually, while the massage is happening, they kind of cut to, I don't know if you saw this, but when they cut to Allison in a car with two of her friends, listening to Howard on the radio, and, like, you know, one of their friends be like, oh, your husband's quite a character. And she's like, no, it's just an act. It's just an act. Did you notice the person in the back seat?
No.
So in this scene, it's Allison, a friend of hers is driving the car, and in the back seat's another friend of hers. The person in the back seat, Edie Falco.
Oh, wow, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, Edie, I looked it up. It's like, oh, Edie Falco from The Sopranos. So, I don't think she even had any lines, but it's definitely her.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, so this is the last big stunt where Howard runs upstairs and Fred has to patch it in up so that they can get the phone call with Kenny on the air. And Howard and Kenny get in a fist fight, and it basically ends with Howard Stern. He accidentally hits Kenny in the nose with the phone and breaks his nose. So all hell is broken loose. This is all on the air. And again, this really did happen, at least to an extent. This is all true.
Yeah, I vaguely remember kind of hearing about this happening, where they dump to a music. I think in the movie they went to like a Christopher Cross song or something. There's a lot of needle drops throughout this whole movie, like I noticed, like so much music. But yeah, and then I think Howard's like, did you cut the feed? What the hell, man? And it's like, oh, Kenny told me to, man. And then he goes up to confront Kenny. Like, I will give Howard this. He thought on his feet really quickly in this scene where he's like, hey, patch me into the phones upstairs, Fred, and then I'll think of something, and I'll confront Pig Vomit on the air. And he does it. And it's like, I mean, I don't know if this was all like exactly how it happened, but if it is how it happened, he's really quick to think of all this stuff.
Yeah, and I just realized one other thing. This is the second time in the movie where Howard is with a naked woman and he's called away, and Fred gets to clean up afterwards and probably get the benefits.
Yeah, Fred and Jenna Jameson, it happened.
Hey man, free drinks. Anyway, so that's the last thing, and the movie always kind of forget this. It ends very abruptly, where Howard goes on the David Letterman show, and Letterman was famous for also hating NBC. So Howard and Letterman are now commiserating about how crappy NBC is, how their bosses suck, and all the NBC execs are like, we can't beat this guy. He's everywhere. He dominates the ratings. We hate his guts. And then the ratings book comes in right after that, and we find out that Howard is #1 in New York. He has actually done it. He overcame all these idiots at NBC. He is now the #1 disc jockey in the #1 market in the U.S. And that's kind of the end of the movie. I kind of forget it just ends with him having a big festival in New York, a big rally where he celebrates how awesome he is, and AC/DC is there.
Yeah, AC/DC's there. Then his wife goes into labor, and yeah, then they get off stage and then they go to the hospital, and then it ends with him going back on the plane, talking to the woman who was disgusted by him at the beginning of the movie, but now seems to be charmed by him at the very end of it.
Yeah, and he gives a long speech here, and I'll read this one just because I read the IMDb trivia that when Howard was hired to do this movie, he thought he could improvise a lot of it. He's like, I'll just improvise it like on the radio, but he couldn't. They're like, no, stick to the script. Ivan Reitman had to be real strict with him. But Howard was allowed to improvise one speech. It's the very last speech in the movie where he turns to the camera, and this is all just off the top of his head. He says, he's talking about the hot woman on the plane he could have got. And he's like, I could get this girl. I know I could get her. And this is the hell that's my life. I mean, think about it. What would it be like to have sex with her? It would be amazing, but I'm not going to act on it. You know why? Because I'm a schmuck. No, it's because I love Allison. She stuck with me, through the whole thing, You got to respect that. I think you have to respect that. Then he looks over at the supermodel again, thinks about it for a second, turns back and says, you have to respect that. So that's his big speech moment there. I think that's a good speech.
Yeah, it is. It's heartfelt, and it's like probably as we said before, like the whole Howard Stern persona is kind of larger than life and takes up most of this movie. But I think that's one of the few moments we can see the real Howard Stern, where he like lets the mask drop for a little bit. We get to hear some really like earnest, heartfelt words from him, and I think it's. I mean, yes, it is true. We knowing what we know now, like how they do break up after a few years, but like in that moment, it's still powerful. I think it still means something.
Yeah, it's a great scene. And of course, I always say this, you always end on a laugh, even if you have a serious movie, that after Howard gives this big, long speech about how he loves his wife, how it was all for Allison, Allison's his best friend, I did this for her. He's like, and who knows, with a little time and the right energy, I think I could talk her into some hot lesbo action.
Oh, that word.
Yeah, anyway, that didn't happen. They got divorced. But,
oh, God.
I mean, who am I to judge? Maybe she did, just not with him there. I don't know.
Hey.
Yeah, so that is Private Parts, a very famous biopic from 1997. I love this movie. There's so many good things about it, so many great scenes. I have such fond memories of seeing it in the theater, almost getting rioted out of the theater by the rowdiest crowd I've ever seen, screaming "Baba Booey, go Fred," stuff like that. But yeah, it's just too bad it's been forgotten over time.
Yeah, I do like in the credits where like Stuttering John comes in out of nowhere and be like, oh, I thought I'd be in the movie, but how you told me to go fuck my like I do like that little thing where Stuttering John pokes his head in. And it's like that again. That's something that only the fans would like really appreciate.
Well, I'm going to make you do this. Now you have to explain who Stuttering John is, because I know who he is, and you do, but most people don't.
I mean, didn't he start as like his intern or something like that?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, he was Howard's intern.
Yeah, and like he noticed that John had this really weird stutter where like his whole face would kind of contort, and he got a kick out of that, and he would have Stuttering John go out and do interviews with celebrities, and say these kind of maybe kind of not great questions or like or questions in order to get a rise out of the people. Like I still remember what was like Billy Crystal. He asked a question to Billy Crystal. I think Billy Crystal might have slapped him or something. Like some of the questions were really meant to instigate a response out of people, and I think he did get into a few physical altercations.
Yeah, Stuttering John was my personal favorite moment my personal favorite guy in the Howard Stern team. He existed for no reason other than to go out and embarrass celebrities with gotcha questions and interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the genius was because this guy John had a stutter, they would feel bad for him and they'd let him keep going with the questions, thinking maybe he just screwed up the question. So like his disability actually worked in his favor, that he can keep asking offensive questions.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's part of the show at all anymore. But yeah, I remember for a while that he was like pretty much a strong staple in the show.
And that guy had balls. I mean, you think Howard Stern had balls. Howard Stern sends Stuttering John into celebrity interviews with bodyguards and every media member around. And John was a nobody. He'd just walk up to celebrities with a microphone and he'd ask Michael Jackson, "Did you learn to moonwalk by trying to avoid your father's punches?"
Jesus.
That was one. I remember he asked Ringo Starr, "What happened to the money?" And Ringo said, "What money?" And he says, "The money your mother gave you for singing lessons."
Oh my God.
Yeah, but one of my favorite is this one. Stuttering John actually got some notoriety, some national fame, because I don't know if you remember, but President Bill Clinton, when he was running for president, there was a woman who said she slept with him, she had an affair with him, and she had a big press conference. And Howard's like, "Oh my God, this woman who slept with a presidential candidate's having a press conference? I got to get in on this."
Right.
So they sent Stuttering John there, and Stuttering John literally asked the first question live on CNN, "Are you planning to sleep with any other presidential candidates?" Which all the reporters, Howard said, they just gasped. Everybody looked at the Stuttering guy. Who asked that question? And Howard's like, "Why is that an unreasonable question? Why is she having a press conference? Who is she?"
Yeah. Like, well, was she?
I don't know, but yeah, Stuttering John would often get punched or slapped or assaulted, and this was very regular, very big part of Howard's show. But he's not in the movie. They pulled him out, so we just get a post-credit sequence of him just complaining that Howard took him out of the movie.
Yeah, it was really something.
The 90s, once again, the 90s were incredible.
Wild times, baby, wild times.
Yeah, but there's actually 3 post-credits scenes in this movie. There's that one. We get a scene of the Oscars where Howard Stern wins Best Actor for Private Parts.
Right, and he does a fart man thing again where he comes down from the rafters, but in this one he just like the cable snap and he just falls flat down on his back.
Yeah, it's a funny scene. It's right in the middle of the credits that he's announced as nominee for Best Actor, and nobody in Hollywood applauds. It's just dead silent. And then when he wins, he falls down to his death, and he dies on the stage, and then they all applaud, which I think is funny.
Yay!
Yeah. But then there's the very end credit sequence. This is after the credits are over, where we get Paul Giamatti complaining about how Howard Stern ruined his life and how he doesn't run he doesn't work in radio anymore. He runs a mall in Alabama or something. And as the speech goes, he gets progressively more angry and more Paul Giamatti, to the point that they start drowning out all his cursing with a jackhammer noise, and it's really funny.
Yeah, it's really good. You get to see some really good Giamatti work in it.
Yeah, that fucking motherfucker.
God damn.
Yeah, the man has no class.
Goddamn motherfucker.
Yeah, and anyway, just a fun little time capsule of 1997. This movie was a big deal. It dropped off the face of the earth, and I'm just so excited you wanted to come on here and talk about it with me, and I'm so excited I met another old school Stern fan.
Yeah, no, we're still out here. We're still rolling deep. But yeah, like I said, it was a huge deal for a while. I mean, it's still streaming out there. Like I saw it on Amazon Prime, and it's still pretty damn funny. But yeah, it's definitely a movie of its time. Like if you showed like younger generations this, they'd probably be horrified and taken aback and faint and write a think piece. But for one beautiful moment in time, this movie came out, and it was a huge hit. One beautiful, glorious moment in time.
One beautiful, maybe the greatest moment in time where Howard Stern had a movie. But yeah, okay. Again, I guess I said this at the start, and I'll say it a little more bluntly now, that they always say, "Oh, this movie didn't age well." And I'm like, bitch, it wasn't designed to age well. It was designed to horrify you. It horrified people then. It horrifies people now. And like that code, "Oh, it doesn't age well." Well, that's just code for, does this work for a shittier modern audience? And no, it probably doesn't, but we should appreciate that it did exist at one time.
Tell him, Mario.
That's right. I'm on my soapbox.
Yeah, get him.
Yeah. So blank a doodle do, Darin. No, just kidding. Okay. Before we sign off, anything else you want to say about the movie Howard Stern? Anything before I let you go?
Baba Booey, Baba Booey.
Perfect. That's the perfect way to end the podcast. And again, everyone, thanks for listening. Again, my name is Mario Lanza. This is Staff Picks. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at staffpicspodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter at Mario J. Lanza. And until next time, I'll be out there searching for more movies that deserve more love, and I'll try to find somebody interesting to come on and talk about them. I'll talk to you later. Don't straddle your subwoofer. Bye.
I tried every fucking thing I could fucking think of to mold him into a proper kind of DJ, but that goddamn son of a bitch. I tell you so, Howard Stern, man. That motherfucker. I'll say that with no shame either. Man's a fucking foul-mouthed immature. The man's immature, you know? He's like a fucking child. I'll tell you this much. There ain't no God while Howard Stern's walking the earth, I'll tell you that. I gotta go.